Matters and privilege and recognition of guests, the Honourable Premier.
Well, good morning, Mr. Speaker, and welcome back to my colleagues for a Friday session of the Legislature. I'd like to just begin my welcoming remarks, Mr. Speaker, by recognizing two farmers in Prince Edward Island, Terry Curley, just up the road from me on Route 2 at Norborough from Monaghan Farms, and John Phillips from West Country Farms in Arlington, Mr. Speaker, who were recognized with nominations among the top 50 agricultural leaders in Canada, Mr. Speaker. We all know that agriculture plays such an important economic role in this province, Mr. Speaker, and I'm blessed that we live in a province where some of the most caring, innovative, and sustainable people make their living in that industry. So congratulations to those two individuals for well-deserved recognition. Mr. Speaker, on March 8th, PEI Women in Business Association will recognize and celebrate International Women's Day, and they'll do so this year with an online event, Choosing to Challenge, featuring Senator Diane Griffin and Sweta Dabu. They will discuss their unique career paths to date and share some of their insights to help women continue to work toward obtaining equality in public service, Mr. Speaker. Pre-registration is required and requested for this event and can be done through the association website. And I encourage all to do that and thank the PEI Women in Business Association for their incredible work, particularly in difficult times this past year. I want to also recognize Beverly Miller, Mr. Speaker, of Summerside. A really nice story. Beverly wrote some of her, I guess, a memoir of sorts of hers called Homefront, My Memories of World War II, 1939 to 1945. And she sold all of her books and donated the proceeds to the PEI chapter of the Make-A-Wish Foundation, Mr. Speaker. And as someone who's undertaken to write some books and certainly haven't sold all of mine, Mr. Speaker, I know the work that went into for Beverly, and what a great gesture that is by her, so thank her for that. And finally, Mr. Speaker, I just want to recognize the success of a local politician down in Three Rivers. Larry Creed was the successful winner of a by-election in the Ward 10 in Three Rivers recently, Mr. Speaker. He was a bit of a legend, as has been indicated here, who once made a famous blue-collar run at the Liberal leadership, Mr. Speaker, and was all those great ideas of blue-collar grassrootsism were beat down by their party, but it was a great, nonetheless, it was a great effort by Mr. Creed, and one that we remember to this day. I know Larry well. He's a friend of mine. He'll do a great job down there on the council, Mr. Speaker, and also to Shane McDonald and Greg Job, who ran to replace Wayne Spinn, who had retired and resigned in October, Mr. Speaker. So congratulations to Larry, and I look forward to working with him in the days ahead. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Third Party.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker, and it's a pleasure to rise on a Friday morning in the Legislature and welcome all my colleagues again and everybody watching at home, particularly those, of course, in District 17, New Haven, Rocky Point. Nice to see you all. Yesterday, Speaker, I mentioned the ice walk in Lennox Island, which was originally planned to take place this coming Monday. And I think as I was actually speaking in the House here, Senator Brian Francis, who lives in my district in Rocky Point, announced that it's actually been postponed for a week. So it's delayed until March the 15th, and it's also no longer, because of the COVID restrictions, open to the public. So I wanted to correct my mistake from yesterday. It was the information I had at the moment. But to encourage people who can unfortunately no longer participate in the ice walk to go to the YouTube channel, and the YouTube channel is The Ice Walk, and you can actually watch the event as it happens on March the 15th. But if you go there this morning, you'll also find a beautiful song and a beautiful video by Tara McLean called Beneath the Path of Crows. That's the name of the song. And it's just a gorgeous piece, an original song written by her, words by her as well. And it's a compilation of a lot of island musicians, including Tim Chesson does backup vocals and plays fiddle, of course. It's just a lovely piece. So if you have a moment, this is a 4-minute or so video this morning. Check that out on the Ice Walk YouTube channel. Again, it's called Beneath the Path of Crows. Thank you, Tara, for another beautiful song. The Premier mentioned Beverly Miller, from Summerside. and her book sales. And the Make-A-Wish chapter here on Prince Edward Island, which used to be called Children's Wish, of course, despite the pandemic, they've been continuing with their important work. And there's always a list of 30 or 40 children waiting, children with critical illnesses who are waiting for their wish to be granted. And that's true today. And unfortunately, they haven't been able to do the things that they typically do, partly because of the COVID restrictions, and also because it's really hard to fundraise in this time. Everybody's having difficulty with that. So thanks to Beverly Miller in Summerside, who, as the Premier pointed out before I stood up here, her book, The Homefront Memories of World War II, all of the profits from the sales she donated to Make-A-Wish. Also, a couple of other islanders who've made substantial contributions. James Gallant from North Rustico donated all of the proceeds from his really popular Christmas light display that he puts on every year. And in my own community, or my own district, I should say, in Canoe Cove, the Jenkins family who do the nativity, the drive-through living nativity in a couple of weeks before Christmas, and it was spectacular this year, probably busier than I've ever seen it. They donated many thousands of dollars to the Make-A-Wish campaign. So thank you to all the islanders who are doing it individually through their work, and I would encourage anybody who has a few extra dollars to look at Make-A-Wish, and it's such important work they do for our community. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Third Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's always a pleasure to rise in the legislature, and I certainly want to welcome all my colleagues back today. Say a great shout out to the residents of Evangeline Muscush and all islanders who may be watching the proceedings today. I just also like to pass on congratulations, as well as the Premier, to John Phillips of Arlington West Country Farms and Terry Curley from Monaghan Farms. These two individuals are very rewarding of their awards, and they've done tremendous things in the Department of Agriculture for the agriculture community and produced our food over the years. And for that, I thank them and all farmers. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I wish everyone a good weekend. Thank you.
The Honourable Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning, Minister responsible for the status of women.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's truly a privilege to rise on this sunny Friday morning. I'd like to say hello to all the good folks in District 9. And Mr. Speaker, as has already been mentioned, today, come Monday, it's International Women's Day, Mr. Speaker, a day to celebrate women here on Prince Edward Island and around the globe. I will be providing a statement later, but I did want to say hello to all of the amazing people working in organizations across Prince Edward Island to support our women here on PEI. I know many of you are tuning in today, so hello to the Advisory Council on the Status of Women, the Women's Network PEI, the PEI Coalition for Women in Government, PEI Business Women's Association, STEAM PEI, East Prince Women's Information Center, Sport PEI, Adventure Group, and Action Femme Île-de-Prince-Édouard. Hello everyone, thanks for everything you do, and I look forward to today's statement and to International Women's Day. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Charlottetown, Brighton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, I'd like to welcome residents of Charlottetown and Brighton, as well as other islanders who are following proceedings this morning. But I especially want to thank the participants who conducted the very impressive mass testing over the past week. We should be proud of our capacity and staff working day and night, as well as all the islanders who spent hours waiting in line. We may have set Canadian records for test per per inhabitant here, which is great. Just so we don't rest too much on our laurels, so I want to mention that in Denmark, for instance, with 5 million inhabitants, they have already performed over 16 million tests. It's over 3 per capacity per day, and the equivalent on PEI would be almost 500,000 tests. So we have a way to go, and I hope we can use our test capacity to help open the island for visitors this summer. Thank you.
The honourable member from Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's a pleasure to rise in the House today. As we look forward to International Women's Day, I would like to recognise, as my honourable colleague from across the floor has done, the incredible value and accomplishments of a number of different organisations across the province that advocate for and support the work of the half of the population of the province. Most of these organisations are non-profits. They are passionate about the work that they do, and they provide a great opportunity for women and women identifying, as well as men, to learn and experience the world through the lens of being a woman or a woman identifying Islander. Mr. Speaker, I'm also grateful that I get to participate again in the Daughters of the Vote this weekend, which is happening virtually, and is a federal initiative happening across the country to support young women who want to have an experience of political activity, both at the federal and provincial level. Previously, it saw 338 young women from across the country take their seats in the House of Commons. Obviously, this year, in a virtual perspective, it allows participation beyond 338 young women. And I'm really grateful to be a panelist again with that organisation and that project. Also, Mr. Speaker, I'd just like to take this opportunity to remind Islanders that the Community Foundation, which is another essential organisation in our province, now has community grants and community scholarships open for application. These are an incredible opportunity for island charities to access funds to do projects, particularly relating to poverty in our province. And the scholarships are very many. There are literally hundreds of thousands of dollars of scholarships available through this granting body for young islanders who want to pursue post-secondary education. And I really encourage any young Islander that wants to apply or needs any assistance to reach out to your MLA, who may be able to provide you with a reference letter, or to reach out to the Community Foundation for further guidance on how you can help your educational journey. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I hope everybody has a great weekend.
The honourable member from Cornwall Meadowbanks, third-party House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, International Women's Day, growing up with three much older sisters, in case one of them are listening. But also the women inside this legislature, their contribution to public service shouldn't go unrecognized as well. And more good news today, too, Mr. Speaker. Cindy Day says it's going to be an extremely warm spring, and for all the golfers out there to start shining up their clubs. So hopefully our golf courses can get an early start and drive the economy of PEI. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Charlottetown, Victoria Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and happy Friday morning to all my colleagues and all of my constituents in Charlottetown, Victoria Park, and all across the island. And last night I had the pleasure of making a video for International Women's Day for the PEI Advisory Council on the Status of Women. And they wanted us to share the theme this year is I Choose to Challenge, and they wanted us to share within 30 seconds our Choose to Challenge. So I kept it brief and kind of general. And what I said last night was, I choose to challenge the status quo that keeps women marginalized. And so I thought I would stand this morning and start that. So I lost my temper in here a couple of days ago, and I was a little more expressive with my body than I usually am. And I felt really guilty, and I felt embarrassed when I went home. And I thought, if I were a man, would I feel that way? And so I started to challenge my thinking, and I thought, we, as a young girl, as a woman, I've learned that showing emotion is a bad thing. And so I'm challenging that today, and I immediately put that feeling of guilt and embarrassment out there. So that is one way that we can all challenge the status quo, is look at what messages as women identifying people and as men identifying people, what are the messages we've learned growing up that are contributing to women not being empowered as the way they should. So I look forward to the proceedings today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Minister of Finance and Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and again, pleasure to rise today in the House. I'd like to recognize International Women's Day on Monday, and I'd like to wish my daughter, Katie, a happy 40th birthday on Sunday, and she is the smartest, strongest, most resilient woman I know, and I just am so very proud. Thank you.
The The Honorable Minister of Social Development and Housing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A pleasure to rise today and welcome everyone watching from District 18, Rustico Emerald. And with International Women's Day on Monday, I just wanted to recognize that in the area that I represent on PEI, there's a long line of women that have represented the area that I've followed in the footsteps of. And I mean, I just made a list of names. I hope I didn't forget anyone, but Jean Canfield, Marion Reed, Marion Murphy, Leon Bagnall, Catherine Callbeck, Beth McKenzie, Carolyn Bertram. So it's a long line, Mr. Speaker, of women that represented the area, and very, very accomplished women who made a huge difference to this island. So I wanted to recognize them here today. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable Member from Charlottetown, West Royalty.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Saying hello to everybody in District 14, and I'd too like to stand and say International Women's Day on Monday is very special, and I was very excited about the month of February, where it's Black History Month, and the incredible contributions of the BIPOC community, women that did incredible things, and they really led the charge. Tamara Steele, Bianca Pillar Garcia Urena, she was instrumental in starting the Black Collective Media, and Kendi did a lot of work on there. So for the month, an incredible amount of awareness work, and I'd want to say hello and shout out to them for the important work they did. And finally, most important of all is my daughter Kiara. I'm wishing her a happy International Women's Day. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I didn't miss anyone, did I? No. Member statements. The Honorable Member from Charlottetown, Victoria Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. March 8th, as we just established, is International Women's Day, a global day of recognition celebrating the social, cultural, and political achievements of women-identifying people and girls, and raising awareness of the work left to do. After the year we've all lived through, I think we can all agree that women-identifying peoples are often the backbone of our families, our communities, and our province. From frontline healthcare workers to grocery store clerks to teachers and caregivers, these essential jobs are largely filled by women-identifying people. I would like to recognize the women-identifying people who shouldered the increased burden at home. In March, when schools and daycares were closed, the burden of childcare and education often fell on us. We see the lasting effects of this in our workforce statistics. Across the country, women-identifying people lost more jobs and have continued to have a significantly higher unemployment rate compared to men-identifying people, even to this day. We see this especially for our youth. From the early research I've read, many have reported having to leave their jobs due to the increase in unpaid work that they have taken on during this pandemic. Not all women-identifying people left the workforce, of course, and many were able to work from home. Well, let me tell you, from what I've heard from constituents, working from home with young children is like trying to do 2 full-time jobs simultaneously, and I think we all agree with that. You end up burnt out, exhausted, and not feeling like you've done a good job at either one, and I can relate to this 100%, and it leads to some mental health effects. But even after such a year of hardship, we continue to press on and lead us towards a better future. The rallies for Black Lives Matter and Mental Health Matters were both led by women-identifying people. Our absolutely amazing Chief Public Health Officer and Chief Nursing Officer have guided us through this scary time with grace and understanding, all the while raising their own young families at home. Mr. Speaker, many of our community and advocacy groups are led by women-identifying people who have bold and brave visions for PEI. I support and appreciate all the work you do. I see you. These amazing women-identifying people all across PEI give me such hope for the future, hope for my daughter and for my son to live in a more equitable world than the one we are currently living in. I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the work that we must do. There is so much that still needs to be done. This year's theme, as I mentioned earlier, is Choose to Challenge. So I am choosing to challenge government, and especially the minister responsible for the status of women, but all ministers and every one of us in this House as leaders to work towards this future. not just in words, but in actions. The women, girls, and those who identify as such on PEI deserve a more equitable future. The men and boys, the people who identify as men and boys on PEI deserve a more equitable future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Cornwall Meadowbanks, the third party up.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to rise today for my member statement to speak about mental health and addiction services in our province. This conversation has been occurring for many years on PEI. However, living throughout the pandemic has sought to shine a light on many issues that still exist. I was disappointed to see little mention of new commitments regarding mental health and addiction services in the throne speech. Instead, we have heard the same recycled promises we have been hearing from this government for 2 years. When the Conservatives were campaigning back in the spring of 2019, the Premier went across the province guaranteeing Islanders that construction of a new mental health campus will begin just days after he won the election. Fast forward to spring of 2020, the government began creating problems of their own in mental health and addictions. When the pandemic began in March, patients were moved from the provincial transitions units at Mount Herbert and also Unit 9 at QEH. Government claims this was to create space for COVID-19, which never turned out to be required, thankfully. Government did not make early enough an effort to maintain crucial mental health and addiction services amid COVID-19 disruptions. We even heard advocates who felt this move directly displayed government's disregard of those important services. In an effort to address the Unit 9 closure, government established psychiatric urgent care clinics, which the former health minister assured the House would not be closing. Despite the assurances from the former minister, we have now seen Charlottetown Psychiatric Urgent Care Clinic close. Mobile crisis units have also been advertised as a new way to treat mental health and addiction concerns in the community. First, government began by disregarding the model recommended by experts, and now we hear the crisis units continue to be delayed. Last fall, we were told we will be ready to roll out early 2021, but yesterday the Minister of Health wouldn't commit to them being ready halfway through April. The latest solution has been the Premier's Mental Well Health Being Centre, which turns out actually not to be a physical centre for those in need, but instead a new working group of individuals. We have heard from many indicating that another group of people alone is not going to fix this complex issue. It is my hope that we will begin seeing an improvement in services as time goes on. However, the last 2 years does not give me great optimism. We need bold and urgent action from government on this issue, not recycled promises and delays. Let's get this right because people need our help. Thank you.
The honourable member from Summerside South Drive.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's World Energy Efficiency Day today. Yesterday, there was a virtual rally for energy justice to make clear why energy efficiency is so important. What is energy justice? Well, it means ensuring that any energy policies are looked at through a social equity lens. Why is efficiency so important? Because it can help lower costs to those who have nothing left to give. I've risen to speak about energy poverty here before in this House, but it's important that the message come through loud and clear. Any transition to a clean energy future must not come on the backs of those who can bear the burden the least. PEI has received good marks from Efficiency Canada for its programs to help low-income islanders, and I do applaud the government for those programs. Wait times and communication can be improved for sure, but the programs are good. However, there is more that needs to be addressed. Here in Atlantic Canada, and perhaps even more so in PEI, we have the highest rates of energy poverty in Canada. One of the ways we amplify that is through systemic issues that punish those who have less. In general terms, those who have less use less out of necessity. When we talk of our electrical grid, it is also true that, in general terms, it costs the utility less to serve those who use less energy. Our rate structure and our minimum purchase price both download costs onto those who should be paying less, both because they have less to give and because it truly does cost less to provide them that electricity. I will be tabling legislation that seeks to address these inequities, while at the same time opening the door to a clean transition that invokes the participation of islanders to become involved, low-cost renewable energy, helping reduce the cost of living on PEI and driving us towards our clean energy goals. I look forward to debate on the legislation and paving the way, figuratively, not literally, to a clean and equitable future for PEI. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
End of member statements. Questions, starting with response to questions taking as notice. No? For our first question, I'll call on the Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. I've had the privilege of sitting in this House for almost 6 years, and one of the issues that's been on my plate that whole time, alongside such things as high-speed rural internet and access to medical services in the South Shore region, is supported decision-making. Supported decision-making is a legal mechanism where adults with a variety of challenges or disabilities choose trusted friends or family members to help them make decisions. Each year when I speak with advocates in the community on this issue, we're told that government is on the verge of bringing forward legislation to implement supported decision-making. Question to the Minister of Social Development and Housing. Last year, there was a dedicated staff member, Loretta Cody-McCauley, who was assigned to this portfolio. Is that still the case today?
The Honourable Minister of Social Development and Housing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as the Leader of the Official Opposition said, supported decision-making is something that the Department has been looking into for some time now, and it's a very important topic, and it has many benefits. I mean, it really allows individuals with cognitive impairments to exercise their right to make choices about their own lives with support from individuals of their choosing. Mr. Speaker, I want to verify that we still have a person dedicated to that before I answer the question, but I believe we do. I would like to verify that, though.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you. I appreciate your candor, Minister, and I look forward to some clarity on that. And indeed, it has been some time, over 10 years, this piece of legislation has been grinding its way through the government gears to get here to the floor of the House. The UN Convention on the Rights for People with Disabilities instructs our governments to make sure that adults with disabilities have whatever supports they need to enjoy their legal capacity. Without that facility, people in vulnerable situations lose their rights, and they're at the mercy of individuals or institutions to make decisions on their behalf, but not necessarily in their best interests. To the same Minister, why has this government failed to bring forward the legislation that would establish these fundamental rights for people with disabilities?
The Honourable Minister of Social Development and Housing.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, indeed, developing a supported decision-making process will bring our province closer to compliance with the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which Canada signed in 2010, and specifically Article 5, equality and non-discrimination, and Article 12, equal recognition before the law. So, Mr. Speaker, this is something that's important, and I would like to dig into further. I can't answer that question specifically as to why we haven't brought it forward yet, but that's something that, as a new minister, I'm going to dig into. Thank you.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, and I'll help you dig into it, Minister. We're planning on bringing forward a motion on this shortly so we can discuss it in the House and hopefully get this process finalised after more than 10 years. British Columbia's supported decision-making law provides individuals and families with an alternative to costly and difficult legal processes such as the power of attorney and guardianship. Whether it is aging parents caring for their adult child with disabilities who are concerned what will happen if they die before their child does, or someone on the autism spectrum who is perfectly capable of living independently but just needs some guidance in some areas of their lives, or somebody who's recently diagnosed with dementia who will soon not be able to arrange the help that they need. We need this legislation right now. To the same Minister, will we see this legislation for supported decision-making tabled this spring?
The Honourable Minister of Social Development and Housing.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And this is something that the department, I know, has been pursuing. They've looked into it. For example, they've done the research, and we know that Alberta and British Columbia do have supported decision-making legislation. And really, the government officials, Mr. Speaker, report that to be beneficial and working well with little exploitation associated. That was one of the concerns. The Yukon, Saskatchewan, Nova Scotia, and Manitoba also have legislation which addresses supported decision-making to some degree. And so of the provinces that don't have the legislation, we're one of them. And I'm not saying we're bringing the legislation this spring, but it's something that's on our agenda, and I'd like to work towards it. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from Charlottetown, Victoria Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Over the past couple of weeks, I've been receiving some concerning phone calls from parents and school personnel regarding the student well-being team. Question to the Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning. Have any members of the student well-being team left their positions this year, and if so, how many?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Honourable Member, for sharing this concern with me. I'm a bit surprised to receive it because I hadn't received any emails from you with those concerns. So thank you for bringing them to light right now. There is one individual that is, from my understanding, leaving the team, but outside of that, I'm not sure. So I can certainly look into it and bring it back to the House.
The Honourable Member from Charlottetown, Victoria Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's not my job to bring these to you. It's happening within your department. I would think you would be aware of them. Last year, my colleague for the critic for health and wellness asked about the lack of exit interviews for psychiatrists in the health system. Subsequently, we were promised that every psychiatrist would receive an exit interview. Question to the same minister. Please tell me that you've learned from the mistakes of your colleagues, and every one of the staff who have left the student well-being team have been given an exit interview.
The Honourable Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. As the member across knows, and as everyone in the House knows, I'm still relatively new to this file, and in terms of the intricacies around our exit interviews, I can certainly look into that and bring that back to the House. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Charlottetown, Victoria Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to assume that those have not been conducted, considering that the minister wasn't sure that they left. Not that I know that you're new in this role, and I can appreciate that. Islanders deserve these answers. I'm guessing we don't know about the current situation. There have been several who have left. The teams are struggling. The councillors are struggling. There are little to no community supports. Councillors have no backup. The mental health of our children could be at risk, and I fear we didn't bother to ask. Question to the minister, will you commit to performing exit interviews with all frontline education staff from now on, and will you commit to please telling your colleagues that this type of practice is necessary and that their opposition will continue to push for it?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm not sure if the member Cross is aware, but I do have a background in HR, and I do strongly agree with her that exit interviews are absolutely of importance to ensure going forward that we know if there are some of these gaps and inconsistencies that we're aware of them when folks are leaving their positions. So absolutely, I'll commit to looking into it, and I will 100% convene with our HR staff to further address this. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Charlottetown, Victoria Park.
And I hope that by looking into it, you mean that you will implement that. The former minister committed to providing at least one full-time counselling position in every island school. And I'm happy to see there's a call out for these counsellors right now on the PSB page. I worked as a counsellor in schools, as you know, and I know firsthand the important work that is done. One day, I'll tell you a quick story. One day I was making a list of all the students I was going to see that day. I was feeling incredibly overwhelmed, as I did almost every day in that role, when an elementary age student came in to me that I'd been working with all year, and he was having suicidal thoughts. Even had a plan in how and when he was going to do it. Of course, I dropped everything, but that meant that all of the other children I was supposed to see that day were affected for the rest of the eternity. Question to the same minister. Now that you are the Minister of Education, will we see this commitment followed through on, and if so, when?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think I need confirmation in terms of what exactly was the question, Mr. Speaker? Can we clarify?
The Honourable Minister or Member from Charlottetown, Victoria Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The question was, are you going to follow through on the commitment of having at least one full-time counsellor in every school, and when will we see that?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the clarification. My apologies. First and foremost, I want to thank the Honourable Member for all of her work in our school system. I know she's an extremely well-respected professional who's made a significant impact on students, and I'm hearing that every day, so thank you very much for your commitment as a school counsellor. As all of our school counsellors, I recognize the important work that they do, and having been a student myself and having utilized their services, I I can say with, from a personal experience that I appreciated their work and commitment to me and again, all our student population. I think, Mr. Speaker, it goes without saying, this government is fully committed to the mental health of our students, and I have to acknowledge the former Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning. It was last year that we allocated new resources to this area, so 13 new positions were added. This is more than ever before. It's unheard of, I think, in the education system. So I just want to, again, thank the former minister, and I'm fully committed to ensuring that that we continue along this trajectory. The mental health and well-being of our students is of utmost priority. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Summerside, Wilmot.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A couple of weeks ago, the new Environment Minister did something that the two ministers before him did not, and we're finally seeing someone prioritize the Water Act. So for that, Minister, I'll start by saying thank you. But some things are still unanswered. Question to the Minister of Environment. Seeing that the last minister blamed the committee for delaying the Water Act, why then are none of the committee recommendations in the new regs?
The Honourable Minister of Environment, Energy and Climate Action.
Well, actually, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's good to actually talk about this and clear the air. I guess, number one, the two ministers who came before me in this role did a tremendous job bringing this along as far as they did. But further to that, one of the key recommendations in the report was that the Act gets proclaimed right away, and that's exactly what I did. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Summerside, Wilmot.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. All members of the Natural Resource Committee believe that we need an irrigation strategy for PEI, and the proposed research study left us with a lot of questions. Another study that doesn't satisfy the concerns of the House is just going to delay this further for farmers, and nobody wants that. We asked for the details of the study to come to the committee prior to being approved. Question to the Environment Minister. Would you send this proposal to the committee for feedback before you give it the go-ahead so we can end up with a result that lets us move forward?
The Honourable Minister of Environment, Energy and Climate Action.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm willing to work with the committee, but I'm going to make the decisions. I view the committee a little bit different than perhaps you view it. I view it more like the opening credits of The Simpsons where Maggie's driving the car, and then when they pull out, you see Marge is driving the car. Marge is driving the car. But I'm more than willing to work with you to get advice, but I don't want to make any mistake where the decisions are going to be made. So I'm not going to wait for the committee. If you want input, I'll definitely send it to you, but we're not waiting around. This has to get done because it's important. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Summerside, Wilmot.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and since that committee is chaired by your caucus, I don't think you'll have any problems there. The minister has only been in this office for a few weeks. These changes were drafted under the last minister, who said that she supported a moratorium on constructing these ponds while at the same time was working to grandfather them in. Question to the minister. Where did the decision to grandfather in holding ponds come from?
The Honourable Minister of Environment, Energy and Climate Action.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I think grandfathering in the minute is really important. I think we have to go back and look at this from a non-emotional level. No one broke the law. And no one recommended anybody broke the law because the holding ponds were legal. So I want to start right there, that the holding ponds have always been legal. They were actually encouraged by the last government. The last government had information on the website on how to go about building a holding pond. So the people who have built them have a considerable amount of money put into them. And I think it would be quite unrealistic for government to say, take a bulldozer and bulldoze them in. I think the point that has been missed on this is that they will be regulated. We are going to bring them under our regulation. When the 5 years passes, every well that feeds one of those has to be permitted by the department. And the permit means there has to be an adequate amount of water, that we monitor it, we monitor how much water is being used, we have the ability to shut them on, which we already currently have the ability to shut them off if we choose to. So we can best protect the water system here in Prince Edward Island. Nobody wants to see wells go dry. Nobody wants to see islanders without water to drink. What we're doing is we're balancing this so that everybody gets what they need out of water here in Prince Edward Island. And I think that's important. And I think it's high time we stop villainizing farmers over trying to feed us. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Summerside, Wilmot.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So this is a point that needs some clarification because the draft Water Act regulations plain language summary, the minister's own press release, and the Q&A on the government's page is very plain that the regulations say Holding ponds will be treated like high-capacity wells, and all existing high-capacity wells are grandfathered in. So according to everything that has been put out by your department, it's not just that they won't be bulldozed, they will be allowed to continue. So question to the minister, do you intend for these to be compliant in 5 years or not?
The Honourable Minister of Environment, Energy and Climate Change.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, they have to be compliant as per the Act. So when we're grandfathering them in, we're telling them you're exactly right. They are allowed to keep them. They are allowed to use them. They are allowed to put water into them. That's exactly, you couldn't be more right. I think the point that you continue to miss on this is that in 5 years, they will be compliant, they will be regulated, and we will control how much water goes into them, if water goes into them at all. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Summerside, Wilmot.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I assure you, Minister, that's not what your regs say currently. Question to the minister, do you intend to keep issuing permits for new holding ponds while we wait for the regulations to come in June?
The Honourable Minister of Environment, Energy and Climate Action.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So we don't currently issue permits, so I'll continue to not issue permits because I don't issue permits for them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Summerside, Wilmot.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So whether or not these holding ponds need to be compliant in 5 years is a real source of contention, and I can table some documents that have been put forward by your department would suggest that's not the case. And frankly, needing them to be compliant is exactly what we've been asking for all the way along. That's what islanders were told when this conversation started. That's what farmers were told when they dug them. But that's not what your draft regulations currently say. If that's your goal, Minister, you're not achieving it. So question to the minister, will you change the clause about grandfathering in existing high-capacity wells so it doesn't grandfather in holding ponds into perpetuity?
The Honourable Minister of Environment, Energy and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So there's some confusion about the regulations in the Act. The Act actually says they have to be compliant. The Act actually says they have 5 years to become compliant. The Act that everybody here voted on and was passed unanimously in this House says it. And we intend for people to abide by the Act. We intend to enforce the Act. And we intend to put in the regulations that we have put forward to get the Act in place at our earliest time, which is June 16th. And at that point, we can revisit the regulations at any point when we see how the Act itself is working. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Mermaid, Stratford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as a Stratford resident, the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure has experienced the safety hazards when traversing the Hillsborough Bridge in its current state during bad weather or during the evening. A question to the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure. What date will the construction of the Hillsborough Bridge active transportation lane and the removal of all of the barriers finally happen?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Well, Mr. Speaker, first and foremost, I'm very proud that this government moved forward and put this very important project further ahead on the calendar that was originally planned. Mr. Speaker, as the honourable member or any member in this House would realize that a project such as this magnitude, when you're working outside, is dependent upon the climate and the weather. So for me to give you a definitive date right now as to when it's going to be completed, that's not possible. We're working diligently to get the project completed, but again, weather patterns may impact when the project is completed. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Mermaid, Stratford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to be honest, Stratford residents have been extremely patient through this whole process. I haven't seen a whole lot of complaining, concerns, and that kind of thing. However, they are ready for it to be done. And I would like to ask the minister, it's important that this active transportation lane be available to islanders year-round. Is the minister committing that this will be a 4-season active transportation lane and that in the operating budget, the snow removal throughout the winter will be covered?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, an active transportation lane such as this, if it wasn't a year-round 4-season lane, it wouldn't be appropriate. So, yes, it will be 4 seasons. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Third Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question today is to the Minister of Social Development and Housing. There's been a lot of talk in this province about a guaranteed income, but there has been very little public discussion about the trade-offs. In 2017, the Minister wrote in favour of a guaranteed income, but he said one of the prices that we may need to be paid is an end to employment insurance. Does the minister still believe that getting rid of EI is an achievable idea in pursuit of guaranteed income?
The Honourable Minister of Social Development and Housing.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's a really good question. It's a good point. I mean, obviously, when you're looking at a universal basic income or a basic income guarantee, there's been a lot of work done by the members of the Special Committee on Poverty, which I was able to join fairly late in the game. And I mean, it was pretty clear at that committee that, you know, eliminating EI was not part of the recommendation that came forward. And so, I mean, I sat on that committee and I had input into that recommendation, and so I stand by that.
The Honourable Leader of the Third Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the same piece, you wrote about your belief that a guaranteed income could get rid of minimum wage. As the Minister of Social Development and Housing, do you still believe in the abolishing of minimum wage?
The Honourable Minister of Social Development and Housing.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I mean, this was along the same lines of a question that I had yesterday. And Mr. Speaker, obviously, when it comes to universal basic income or basic income guarantee, this is an evolving file, and it's something that there's recommendations on the table from the special committee. I mean, I think the Premier said before, we really need to educate Islanders on what a basic income guarantee really means and what it includes and how it works, and that's part of my role as Minister. And when it comes to minimum wage, how a basic income works together with minimum wage is something that we have to address.
The Honourable Leader of the Third Party, a second supplementary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm glad to hear that you're talking about consulting with Islanders. Finally, Mr. Speaker, the Minister also stated his belief that a guaranteed income could mean the end of income support. Does the Minister of Social Development and Housing believe in getting rid of income support?
The Honourable Minister of Social Development and Housing.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And so when it comes to income support, it's split into really the two different streams. One is social assistance, and one is accessibility supports. And when it comes to a basic income, we have a secure income pilot, which is basically a targeted basic income that covers off a group of those people. And Mr. Speaker, again, this is an ongoing discussion. I mean, I'm not going to stand here and stay today and say yes exactly, but if you refer back to the recommendation from the special committee, I think it'll help answer some of your questions. I know you're on the committee, so I think you have a good knowledge of that.
The Honourable Member from Cornwall Meadowbanks.
Mr. Speaker, in the speech from the throne and the State of the Province address, we heard a number of new initiatives announced from this government. The one announcement many Islanders were waiting to hear was glaringly absent. To the Minister of Health, why was there no plan announced for supervised consumption sites in either the speech from the throne or the State of the Province?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank the honourable member for the question. And I would like to go back briefly, Mr. Speaker, to the member's statement earlier, where he indicated that there really was nothing in the speech from the throne for mental health and addictions. And Mr. Speaker, I'd like to take the opportunity to emphasize that that is not completely accurate. There's three different things that have been incorporated in the speech from the throne. Mr. Speaker, there's a $10 million Community Mental Health and Addictions Fund. Mr. Speaker, there's a single point of access that will be established, and I'll actually be bringing information forward on that single point of access next week. And as well as that, Mr. Speaker, PI Centre for Mental Wellbeing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Cornwall Meadowbanks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not sure about that answer to my question, but we'll try this one. Mr. Speaker, even the former Minister of Health rose in this legislature to voice his belief in and desire to see supervised consumption sites rolled out in PEI to augment our harm reduction approach to addiction services here in the province. So, Minister, do you personally support supervised consumption sites?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I think it's one thing, Mr. Speaker, that we always have to be looking forward to is how can we help those individuals with regard to mental health, whether it's with regard to addictions. And at the end of the day, if individuals, which we know right across the province, have addictions, we certainly, as a government, as a society, for these individuals to make it safe for them as possible. We look at the number of our voluntary fire departments, of Island EMS, the number of places where naloxone kits have been provided to by this government to provide safe and secure locations in the event when a 911 call does come in. With regard to the member's question, he asked my personal opinion on this, and my personal opinion on this, Mr. Speaker, is yes.
Cornwall Meadowbanks.
I'm glad to hear the minister affirm his belief and commitment to supervised consumption sites here in this province. Mr. Speaker, and I think most people in this legislature would support that as well. But Mr. Speaker, the bigger issue here is when can Islanders struggling with addictions expect to see a rollout of supervised consumption sites in our province? They've received absolutely no indication that these sites were a priority from either the speech from the throne or the state of province address. When can we find out about safe injection sites?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank the honourable member for the question. And, you know, we have had discussions one-on-one, myself with the member, with regard to addictions, with regard to mental health, and with regard to the services that are provided. And I think it's one of the things as we go forward, and it doesn't matter whether it's a single point of access, whether it's mobile response units, Mr. Speaker, we need to, as we move forward, to make sure that we do get it right. And I'll reiterate, yes, that I do support it. I will move forward on this. I'm not going to stand here and give a date, though, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from Cornwall Meadowbanks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, question to the Premier. Mr. Speaker, MB Power ended the 2020 fiscal year with a $4.9 billion in debt. This is a major concern, and it was flagged by the Auditor General of New Brunswick. Question to the Premier. Have you spoken to your colleague, Premier Higgs, on this very troubling matter?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I speak to my colleague, Premier Higgs, on a regular basis about a variety of topics, energy being one of them. Don't think in my recent memory that we have talked about the debt of NB Power.
Charlottetown, Cornwall Meadowbanks.
Mr. Speaker, the reason that this should be a concern for our government here is because the New Brunswick government guarantees what MD Power's debt is. And we know that the New Brunswick government is in precarious financial shape at the present time. The New Brunswick Auditor General says that MB Power debt is the largest risk to the province of New Brunswick. And approximately 60% of our power here in PEI comes from MB Power. I guess my question is, we should be talking to Mr. Higgs, and this will have an effect on Islanders' power rates. So can we concern the Premier that he will address this issue with Mr. Higgs?
The Honourable Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I do thank the honourable member for the question. And, you know, as Atlantic Premiers, we've been talking extensively about what is referred to the Atlantic Loop, which was referenced in the federal government document earlier, Mr. Speaker, this fall. And that is all about Atlantic Canada trying to come up with more secure, more sustainable, and more green energy sources, Mr. Speaker. And it obviously, our electricity is directly connected to New Brunswick. I think 60% was the number that the honourable member quoted, and that is accurate to my account, Mr. Speaker. But it's part of the reason why we're trying to diversify along the way, Mr. Speaker, and that has to be done in conjunction with NB Power, with Maritime Electric, with a number of different providers in Nova Scotia and Newfoundland and Labrador, Mr. Speaker, along with the 4 Atlantic provinces and the province of Quebec. It's a complicated issue, Mr. Speaker, but one we continue to tackle and address.
The Honourable Member from Cornwall Meadowbanks, your second supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the answer, Premier. MB Power, based on the Auditor General comments, the New Brunswick Auditor General charges some of the lowest rates in Atlantic Canada. But with this report, obviously customers will face an increase in power rates. And I guess my concern is, how does your government plan on dealing with a possible rate hike that will affect all individuals, businesses, industries, and sectors? And we're in the middle of somewhat of an economic troubling time with the pandemic. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, you certainly never want to see electricity rates go up, Mr. Speaker, and it's an issue we face as a province. We already pay some of the highest power rates in the country, Mr. Speaker, and that's a troubling trend for sure. We have tried to make the investments in wind power, solar, Mr. Speaker. We're working with our Atlantic colleagues on issues such as the Atlantic Loop when it comes to a more greener generation and really some more autonomy in terms of our own power generation, Mr. Speaker. All I can do, Mr. Speaker, is try to make sure we address this issue to the full extent that we can, but it's a concern, and it's I think we all know as islanders it's a vulnerability that we face as an island province, and it's one we have to do a better job of trying to address.
Monica Kilmore.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I just want to follow on Summerside Wilmot's questions. Our committee, one of our recommendations was your committee recommends that government consider referring all future research proposals on the impacts of high-capacity wells to the Standing Committee on Natural Resources and Environmental Sustainability. And our committee asked that we could see the terms of reference for the proposed study that would take place. Minister, are these terms of reference complete?
The Honourable Minister of Environment, Energy and Climate Action.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So no, they're not. We're going to pull together a committee, and it's going to have a variety of experts kind of leading the committee, from watershed groups to agriculture to water experts right across the province. They'll come up with the terms of reference, and once we have them, we will submit them to committee. But like I stated earlier, that does not mean the work stops. You are welcome to provide input, but we're not waiting for you. If you want to, if you want to give us your feedback, do it quickly, because the boat is leaving the dock right away. Thanks.
Monica Kilmore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I guess my name's now Maggie. The Water Act and the new regulations were released on a Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock, usually when government wants to push something out without many people knowing about it. And I'm happy to hear that the minister is going to make these, will send the terms of reference to the committee. I'm not sure why he is, because he said he doesn't even want to listen to what we have to say. Minister, if you send these to a committee, will you actually listen to what the committee has to say?
The Honourable Minister of Environment, Energy and Climate Action.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A lot of things to unpack in those statements. I guess the honourable member over there is getting his questions from Kerry Campbell. The only other person who's talked about the 3 o'clock is Kerry. We tried to actually put it out on Thursday. We had caucus. You were at it. I talked about it at caucus upstairs that we were trying to do it. We got fetched up and we couldn't get it out that day. The earliest we could get it out was Friday. Because I have 2 small children and I had to arrange for them to get fed and be in Charlottetown, that was the earliest I could possibly do it. And we had CBC lined up to do an interview. I had to get to my office, and I had to take my better half with me and twins to feed in one room while I was trying to do an interview in the other room. So it's much less sinister than you and Kerry Campbell think it is. It was a victim of my own circumstances that created that. But to the committee, to go back to the committee, committees report to this House and give recommendations to this House. You may think that you give them directly to ministers or whatever, and that's fine if you want to continue to believe that. Any good advice I'm always willing to take. You know, you've worked with me for a number of years. We actually coached a hockey team together probably 12 years ago when you were 14 years old, so we've known each other for a long time. You know that I'm always open to good advice, so if you can get that committee to provide good advice, it will be taken. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Montclair, your second supplementary.
So I would take it that the minister sees that the groups that we met with, groups right across PEI, farmers, scientists, that their advice is no good. Mr. Speaker, so the minister said that he would send this to committee, he would make this public. I think we're happy to hear that. Obviously, we're under a short time frame with what the committee can report back to, 90 days. We are quite happy that the minister did move forward and finally set a date to have this act come into effect. It's very positive. Minister, again, when you send the terms of reference to a committee that we can look at it, will you actually take our advice seriously?
The Honourable Minister of Environment, Energy, Climate Action.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think I've kind of outlined that any advice that I would take would have to be reasonable. So I'll start from that point. That's our jumping point, that any reasonable advice will not be sent back. As far as the Act itself goes and the precarious period that we kind of have ourselves in because it doesn't actually come into effect until June, one of the previous opposition members who now sits over here made the change to the bill when it was on the floor when it first came in to do that 90-day period. I would have liked to have had everything go in on the day that we took it to cabinet, but that wasn't possible. But yeah, I think it's safe to say that, as I had said previous, if there's something reasonable, then we're going to hear it out. We also have a group of experts who sit around a table in my office who do this for a living, who went to school for this, who are really smart at this, and I'm going to lean pretty heavily on their advice, but if there's something you can do that would trump the advice of experts, then yeah, I'd look at it. Thanks, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Tyne Valley Sherbrooke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This government promised to be bold in its attempts to fix the mental health and addiction system on PEI. They promised to use evidence in every decision they make. Question to the Minister of Health and Wellness, what exactly is your definition of evidence?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank the member for the question. What my definition of evidence is taking the advice that we have, as the minister sitting ahead of me has said, we have experts in our departments that provide feedback. When I make a decision, when we as a government make a decision, Mr. Speaker, we have to take the advice of the experts into account when we're making those decisions. And across the board, Mr. Speaker, that is what this government does. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from Tyne Valley Sherbrooke.
Well, that's interesting. With a background in research myself, I was excited to hear health bureaucrats brag to a legislative committee recently about a research project that analyzed the lived experiences obtained prior to launching police-first mobile mental health crisis teams. Question to the same minister, do you know how many people were included in this research project? Do you know how many questions they were asked?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm not sure if I heard the honourable member correctly, but I do believe that she used the word brag. Am I correct there? Anyway, we'll leave that as it may be. When members appear before the committee, Mr. Speaker, before any committee, I don't think that they're there to brag. They are there to provide the information to answer the questions that are forthcoming from committee members. And, that's right across the board, Mr. Speaker. I'm quite sure that the member is referring to the mobile mental health units, which we are moving forward on, Mr. Speaker. And as I've said here a couple of times in the legislature previously, Mr. Speaker, that will be taking place, that those units will be on the road sooner, much sooner rather than later. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Tyne Valley Sherbrooke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And yes, I did use the word brag, and my tone was intended to be critical. Honestly, Mr. Speaker, 4 people, 1 family, 4 questions each. That's it. That's all we asked. Honestly, Mr. Speaker, I could get a larger sample by asking the other members of this House about their struggles with mental health. And since we have no idea how these participants were selected, it might just be as representative. This isn't even a solid effort at a research project that was meant to inform one of the most sought-after services on PEI, not to mention the expert recommendations against a police-led model that were completely ignored, if they were looked at all. Question to the minister, is your department's attempt to check a box, is this an attempt just to check a box that says you're evidence-based? And do you really think the quality of this work is going to pass Islanders' expectations of you?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And it disappoints me that we look at the line of questioning with regard to experts in the department who present it to a standing committee. Are we always going to have different opinions? Are we going to be able to receive expert advice? With that expert advice, giving different direction? Absolutely, that's going to take place. But, Mr. Speaker, as we launch for mobile response units, certainly we have to prioritize safety. That safety has to be with regard to not only the clients, to the islanders that we are serving, but it also has to prioritize safety for the workers that are responding, Mr. Speaker. And I will say, Mr. Speaker, that as we move forward on this, we will continue to monitor it. We will always have to be open to making changes, to making improvements in any service that government provides. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Time Valley Sherbrooke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have one more question.
Final.
He didn't
I
say
don't have
final. Yeah, sorry. Okay. So, yes, so my question is in response to this then. So you mentioned Islanders with lived experience. You mentioned needing to engage with those who are actually working on the front lines. I didn't hear that any of that was actually done beyond these, few interviews. You listened to a few experts in your department, but this is a huge initiative, incredibly important. And there is a considerable amount of evidence across the country that will tell you what it is in terms of best practices when you implement a new model. So I didn't hear that any of that work was done, and I am incredibly concerned that we can consider 4 interviews with 4 people and 1 family enough to say, yeah, we understand the lived experience of Islanders who will be engaging with this service. So question to the Minister of Health, will you be doing any further consultation? Will you be engaging with Islanders who have lived experience so that you can really understand what is needed for Prince Edward Island?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And you look at the motion that was brought forward here by the official opposition the other day. And what did it state? Toxic work environment. The people, that Islanders are not being treated appropriately by staff. We have a fantastic civil service, Mr. Speaker, and I just want to emphasize that. Mr. Speaker, when you look at the grassroots input, you look at the speech from the throne that was tabled when this legislative sitting opened, and you look at the initiatives with regard to health care and with regard to mental health and addictions in particular, and let's look at one of them, the PEI Center for Mental Well-Being, and that is going to provide an opportunity for experts, for government, for our great civil servants as well to provide input, but Mr. Speaker, also for the grassroots, the ones that live in this day in and day out and deal with it, to be able to provide input back to us with regard to gaps that may be existing in the system that we then can act upon. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
End of questions. Statements by Minister. The Honourable Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning, the Minister responsible for the status of women.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to recognize Monday, March 8th as International Women's Day. International Women's Day is an opportunity to recognize women leaders, women who help from the shadows, women whose voices are heard from the rooftops, and women whose soft whispers have provided comfort through these tough times. Due to the pandemic, celebrations will look different from past years. The International Women's Day Organizing Committee brings advocacy and celebration online this year with a podcast series featuring 5 exceptional women and gender-diverse people sharing their perspectives and experiences. To listen, Islanders can go to the PEI Advisory Council on the Status of Women Facebook page. Additionally, I want to encourage MLAs and all Islanders to celebrate the diverse voices and contributions women have made and continue to make in our lives by posting on social media and using the hashtag IWDPEI. Mr. Speaker, the International Women's Secretariat provides annual grants to community organizations for direct services and programs that enhance awareness, education, and social action in our province. This year, 8 community organizations will receive funding through the Interministerial Women's Secretariat Grant. They are Women's Network PEI, PEI Coalition for Women in Government, PEI Women's Association, STEAM PEI, East Prince Women's Information Center, Sport PEI, Adventure Group, and Action Femme L'Île-Prince-Édouard. Here is how the organizations will use this funding. Women's Network PEI will develop an annual training for men and boys interested in engaging in violence prevention. The PEI Coalition for Women in Government will shed light on the political process by creating and sharing a number of adaptable resources and tools, as well as one-on-one mentoring opportunities. This project will help diverse candidates who typically find themselves unable to break into politics and are often discouraged from getting involved. PEI Business Women's Association's project will seek to attract young women under 30 years of age, including recent post-secondary graduates in PEI, newcomers to the island, and the BIPOC community who have created a business or are thinking of creating one by developing business leadership skills they need to thrive during this challenging time. STEAM PEI will develop and deliver 2 extracurricular math programs, a series of after-school classes focused on play-based and practical life math for students identifying as female in kindergarten and grade 1, plus a series of lunchtime classes focused on growth mindset around math for grades 5 and 6. The East Prince Women's Information Center will provide a training opportunity in person and online to develop strong leadership skills. Sports PEI's project is focused on organizing a number of workshops and group coaching to female leaders in sport. Adventure Group will use the grant for the Adventure in Kindness, Learning Empathy and Leadership During the Pandemic project. Action Femme L'Île-de-Prince-Édouard will use the grant for a social reconnection project that was designed for Acadian and Francophone women in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank all of the recipients and all the people who work to advance equality for girls and women on Prince Edward Island, and I look forward to seeing the outcomes of these projects. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Charlottetown, Victoria Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In my opening statement, I talked about how awesome and amazing island identifying people are and how they've been especially so over the pandemic, over the past year. Now I would love to see that same awesomeness reflected in the actions of the minister responsible for them. I want to stop hearing how much women are valued, and I want to see this government show us how much they value people who identify as women by taking action. Grants are not enough. On this International Women's Day, I want to see a women's economic recovery strategy for PEI. I want to see a women's wellness strategy for this province that was promised 2 years ago. I want to see midwifery implemented across this province. I want the third option available to every woman across the province who wants it and needs it. I want to see the 1,000 First Days initiative fleshed out and implemented, hopefully in a way that supports women identifying people and their children. I want this minister responsible for women to publish gender diversity and inclusion targets with measurable outcomes that are annually reported. I want to see us normalize using inclusive language and inclusive actions. The word women and/or woman must mean people who identify as women, and to include all women representing the diversity of this island, including but not limited to diversity of age, race, religion, sexual orientation, ability, and socioeconomic background. We keep hearing about how this government uses a gender-based analysis, but do they truly understand why this matters, other than because I've been harping? Do you understand why it matters? I don't see the action I expect from a government using this lens. Even I know it's new, but I still don't see that. And I don't know what targets or benchmarks have been set for themselves, and I look forward to seeing more and hearing more about this. The PEI Advisory Council on the Status of Women monitors the PEI government's overall actions towards gender equality over time. Their goal is to collaboratively work with governments to help the province achieve high grades in all priority areas. The Council presents their results of their assessment in the Equality Report Card. On this International Women's Day, I choose to challenge this government to stop talking about women identifying people and to start taking meaningful actions to make equity for women and women identifying people a priority on PEI. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Charlottetown, West Royalty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Minister, for bringing this forward. And it's an important announcement today about grants, and I really think that's important. The grants, these grants are going to go a very long way, I think, to doing a lot of good work, especially after we're getting out of COVID, and we understand the tribulations of what COVID-19 did on the women's population. And I stand in support of your announcement, and I stand in support of those organizations. And yes, we have to do more, but I do believe in celebration of International Women's Day, we should do just that and celebrate this step, and we'll do more, and I look forward to chatting with you about that. These grants are very important, especially the Women's Network one about engaging men and boys. And I think right now we all have a role to play, and I've had discussions with that. I've been part of a group called Man Up, and we want to engage more men and boys in this fight, and I think it's a very, very important announcement here today, and especially with the Sport PEI and all the groups that were announced. And I look forward to working with you, and especially the PEI advisory of the Council of the Status of Women. And this is a great announcement, and I'd just like to thank the minister and all those involved, and happy International Women's Day.
Presenting and receiving petitions. Tabling of documents. The Honourable Leader of the Third Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As mentioned yesterday in my speech, I would like to table documents of a release put out by the Leader of the Official Opposition about the importance of the House reconvening in 2020. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Shall I carry? No more tabling of documents. Reports by committees. Introduction of government bills, government motions. The Honourable Minister of Agriculture, Land, Minister of Justice, Public Safety, and the Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, seconded by the Minister of Fisheries and Communities, that pursuant to Section 12.2 of the Justice of Peace Act, the report of the Justice of Peace Remuneration Review Commission dated November 12, 2020, and as tabled on November 26, 2020, be adopted.
Shall I carry? The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, seconded by the Honourable Premier, that the first order of the day be now read.
Shall I carry?
Order number 1, adjourned debate on the draft address. Debate was adjourned by the Honourable Member from Charlottetown, Belvedere.
The Honourable Member from Charlottetown, Belvedere.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I had the opportunity to speak at length yesterday, and I'm just going to conclude my remarks today, but I do think, given some of the comments that have been made by other members in the House, that there is some clarification required, Mr. Speaker, which is relevant to the previous topics that I was bringing forward around poverty, housing, and equity. And that's this, what seems to be real confusion about what a minimum wage is and what it's for, what a basic income is and what it's for, and what a livable wage is and what it's for. So I'm going to take this opportunity to kind of conclude my remarks by making hopefully some clarifications for those who are watching and for the members in the House. So even those that have been participating for a number of months now in the Special Committee on Poverty still seem to have some challenges with this. So it's, I think it's something that clearly is difficult. And the more that we talk about it and normalize understanding all these different terms and what they mean, perhaps it'll be easier for us to make decisions that will actually benefit islanders. The minimum wage was originally implemented to protect workers and ensure that they had a minimum wage that meant that they could live on what they earned. That's where it came from, and that's why it's so important. We've all agreed, pretty much, I think, in this House, that a minimum wage currently is not enough to live on. And in fact, we actually have data done by the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, specifically looking at how much it costs to live and what you would need to earn as an hourly wage. And in Charlottetown, that's $19.30 an hour, which is a pretty far cry from the $13 an hour that we'll be at as of April 1. Let me be clear before I am quoted in any way, Mr. Speaker, I am not suggesting that we immediately implement a minimum wage of $19.30, though that would be great. I am obviously also an economist and realistic that there needs to be a bridge from where we are now to achieving a wage. And so some of the other measures that I've been talking about are things that we do that. Mr. Speaker, a basic income was significantly researched, discussed, presented, and we have an extensive report presented in this House and tabled that goes through exactly how and why a basic income is something that we should have as a tool in our toolbox for PEI. But that report made it abundantly clear that a basic income is not the only solution to poverty. It is not a huge, great big bandage that will fix everything that we have here. It is a very large tool, but it is one tool of many. That report made it very clear that we would need to retain and potentially even expand other programs that support islanders with needs that would not be met by a basic income alone. A great example of that are the additional supports that are provided to disabled islanders who would require those supports to continue. So when we talk about a basic income, we need to be really clear that we are talking about providing a foundational income for all islanders so that they are not in poverty. It is literally the base foundation to ensure that islanders do not suffer from poverty. It would not be replacing a minimum wage in any way, because the ability to work has nothing to do with whether or not you should be in poverty. What a basic income does is ensure that no one is poor anymore. When they work, the money they earn should be paid at or above a minimum wage, whatever that minimum wage is. And they should have the employment supports and rights and standards that anyone should be afforded when they work. When they work, that money they earn is on top of that basic income, and our report was very clear that a basic income would be reduced until it was no longer required because somebody is earning enough. So there is no connection between how much we pay people as a minimum wage and the need for a basic income. We recognize that those two things work together to make our economy stronger. Mr. Speaker, it also means that things like programs like the child tax benefit, which has done the most impactful thing that has happened for child poverty in Canada ever, would continue. EI would continue. These are programs that provide alternative forms of income. In fact, they are in their own way a form of an income support. The child tax credit, OAS, GIS, these are all ways that we provide income to islanders in need now. They are not sufficient, but they have a huge impact, and they would not be removed. We are not in a position where we would consider taking away programs that do the right thing for islanders. In the long term, if we are able to bring basic income as a tool into our toolbox, Mr. Speaker, then yes, we may see the end of social assistance. And that is not a bad thing. But in the interim, we are not in a position to suggest that we get rid of anything. What we are in a position to do is to suggest that it's time that we start thinking about all the different tools that we have in the toolbox. It will take a long time, hopefully not too long, but it will take a long time for us to get to the point where we have a basic income in place that is solid and a part of our social justice system in which we can start unpacking some of the other things. So the list of actions that I identified yesterday, Mr. Speaker, around social assistance, around accessibility supports, around low-income supports, housing, community services, and equity, those are all tools as well. And those are tools that we can start implementing now, next week, next month. We do not have to wait for some federal government official to come in on their white horse and save us. We are perfectly capable of doing great things now by taking good action now. And anything we do is going to mean that there are fewer islanders living in poverty. There are fewer islanders who are not experiencing the island that we want everyone to experience. And that picture of poverty here in PEI is reduced. Then when those federal agents on their white horses or whoever they may be ride up, we're ready. We're ready because we know who it is that we need to serve. We can talk about how much it's going to cost. We know where we've already achieved. We can demonstrate that we're in the game, Mr. Speaker. That's why the Poverty Elimination Strategy Act that I'm going to be bringing forward later on this session is so important. It allows us to actually show and demonstrate to potential partners, including government and community partners, that we actually take this seriously, that we intend to provide a structure that will support taking meaningful action on poverty, that we can and will measure and provide the data that, frankly, the federal government is going to expect us to provide. Mr. Speaker, I really appreciate the opportunity to respond to the throne speech and share some of these perhaps not so crazy ideas and actions that we can take. I truly believe that we are in a really amazing space currently. COVID has been one of the most difficult things I think that many people have experienced, but it also has and does create opportunity for government to be able to pivot. And this is one of those spaces, Mr. Speaker, where a pivot is not only, an option, but it's a necessity. If we truly mean that all islanders matter, and if we truly think that all islanders deserve to live in security and dignity, then now is the time to act. I look forward to working collaboratively with the minister across the floor and with any other member of government who chooses to take this seriously. I think we have a place here to change our space for the better, and that is, frankly, a legacy I think it's worth leaving behind. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to speak today.
The honourable member from Tyne Valley Sherbrooke, third party whip.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And may
Opposition whip.
Yeah, I'm sitting on this side, so I know. May I have the podium, please? Mr. Speaker, the intention of this throne speech was to outline a brave and bold vision that our government has for this island, and it is no surprise to anyone that healthcare is front and center. And we all know that not much sounds more exciting to islanders than a brave and bold vision for their healthcare. The number one topic that I hear from constituents is about healthcare. I'm sure I'm not alone. What are we without our health? In recent years, mental health and addictions has become a major concern for many islanders. Again, no surprise. It's been years of broken promises from one government to the next. Promises by the former Liberal government of new supports with no follow-through. And then promises directly from this current premier to get shovels in the ground on day one. Maybe he's digging the hospital foundation by hand and that's why it's taking so long. Should have promised a backhoe, perhaps. After 2 years of experience, we get to see the new vision for healthcare from this government. There are a few exciting promises. There are a few exciting promises. But I'm getting wary of the number of promises we've been given versus the number of actual actions that have been taken. In the previous version from this government 2 years ago, midwifery, the third option, a women's health strategy, anonymous HIV testing, mobile crisis teams were among the promises. Last time I checked, we didn't have any of these yet. That's why I said I'm getting a bit weary of listening to this government's promises. Fool me once, shame on you. Now I'm not about to let you fool me again. But let's assume for a minute that this vision is different from the last one. Let's assume for argument's sake that this premier means what he says and sincerely plans to deliver. One major disappointment, no mention of the new mental health hospital. Community services are necessary and great, of course, but are we just going to forget about people in crisis who need clinical support? In a podcast interview with Drake and Dabu, Premier King stated that less than 30% of mental health calls require clinical intervention. But that means almost 30% do. I am all for preventative work, Mr. Speaker, but we cannot forget completely about the needs of Islanders who were failed by our systems. Lack of prevention, and now we are in crisis and in need of acute mental health care. A 24/7 phone line was announced in the throne speech. This line has been called a single point of service. For this to be true, it will require full integration into our healthcare system with on-island professionals assessing and with the ability to refer and help guide Islanders through every step of the process to access the services they need. However, a phone line is only as good as the services behind it. What good is knowing where you can receive detox treatment if that service isn't available to you for another 3 or more weeks? And Mr. Speaker, I hear this all the time. Imagine having a heart attack, calling 911 and being told, we can treat you at the QEH, we'll book you in for a stay in April. It's ludicrous to think of healthcare being provided in such a way. But for Islanders struggling with addiction, this is their reality. Severe addictions are acute, life or death situations, yet this government treats them like they are optional. Do you think that statement is too harsh? Let's look at this government's actions. When the pandemic first hit back in March, what services were first to close? Optional ones. Those that were deemed non-essential, such as elective surgeries, non-emergency appointments, and almost all acute mental health and addiction supports. The transition unit, Unit 9, some detox beds, all gone. You can tell me how much you care about mental health and addictions and how much of a priority it is for your government until the cows come home. But those flowery words and grand stories will do nothing to erase the reality of your actions this past spring. When push comes to shove, we saw your true colors. Even more concerning is that it seems that some of our most senior mental health and addictions professionals did not actually have a seat at the decision-making table at this time. Our mental health and addiction services were severely affected, maybe more so than any other health service. And this government didn't even consult with our experts. This is becoming a sad and concerning trend. Another promise in this throne speech regarding mental health or mental wellness is the creation of a PEI Center for Mental Well-Being. This center will be funded by, but independent of government. You and I both know, Mr. Speaker, that it is all but impossible without strong legislation to mandate it. I hope that this legislation will be tabled very soon. An interesting part of this center, according to the Premier's recent State of the Province address, is that the Board of Directors will have one seat for each political party to fill. Because what every Islander and frontline worker wants more than anything else is more political interference in their healthcare system. There's the answer to a problem absolutely nobody identified. All this being said, I am hopeful. I have to be. Islanders have struggled with poor mental health and addiction services for decades. Every new government promises change, but so far, nothing. But I am hopeful because, not because of this government, but because of the advocates that I have met. Advocates for mental health and addictions are getting loud. They are intelligent, they are passionate, they are courageous, and they are persistent. They have collectively changed the way we talk about and consider mental health and addictions in this province. They are the reason that mental health and addictions is spoken of so often in this House. I have no doubt that they will continue to advocate for better care until they get it. So to them, thank you. This speech promises to see increased investments in virtual care. And we know that the federal government has provided funding to the province specifically for this. Virtual care is a valuable tool in the toolbox for PEI healthcare professionals and promises to be an integrated component of the new EMR system. We await more details of what this integration will look like. However, I note that in our other provinces where the TELUS EMR has been used, there have been privacy issues with the Babylon app or the virtual care provider that TELUS Health uses in those provinces. I hope we will hear about how this government has considered these issues seriously and will ensure the privacy of islanders will be protected in this process. Virtual care was also quickly expanded during the pandemic with the introduction of Maple Virtual Care. I submitted through a written question a request for government to share the contract signed by Maple, but I received no answer. I know that for many islanders who have been waiting to be assigned a family doctor for 2, 3, 5, or even 7 years, the introduction of Maple was most welcome. But it was not the only option. The reality is that the actual services that can be provided through Maple Care are extremely limited, and it would seem to not extend beyond that which pharmacists are trained to deliver either in person or virtually, such as prescription renewals and treatment for basic ailments such as UTIs. I am surprised that a government that says it supports our local businesses first completely overlooked the opportunity to support our local pharmacists, who are also local business owners that live in and contribute to our communities. Pharmacists are also part of our communities and have relationships with people, know their medical history, and can provide a continuity of care that is impossible through isolated interactions with an online app. This is a lost opportunity, Mr. Speaker. Speaking of promises that are made by every incoming government on PEI, let's talk about recruitment. Physician recruitment has long been a priority on PEI, and for good reason. Our patient registry continues to grow year after year, regardless of the efforts of government. Family physicians provide the foundation to our healthcare and services. Without a family doctor, islanders are missing this foundation, and it can seriously affect their health, their well-being, and the ability to navigate the rest of our healthcare system. So what's the problem? We can't seem to ever recruit enough doctors to catch up or even keep up with the demand. And it's not just doctors. Nurses are becoming harder and harder to recruit and retain. I'm glad to see this government acknowledging that and committing to investing in efforts to recruit and retain all levels of nurses. But will our efforts be any better with nurses than they have been with doctors? Is the system broken, or is it working exactly the way it was built to? The system for recruiting and retaining all healthcare professionals revolves around money. We don't have enough doctors, offer them more money. Not enough nurses, offer them more money. Sure, of course, we should be paying fair and competitive wages. But is that really the issue? Has anybody really stopped to ask that? I can't tell you how many nurses have reached out to me this year to tell me that money is not the issue. Are the issues that they're facing in the workplace serious? Yes, but not ones that can be simply fixed with money. They want work-life balance. And that's something we should be proud to say that we want to help them achieve. They want to request vacation time that actually sometimes doesn't get rejected. They want a seat at the decision-making tables when decisions are being made that not only affect their lives, but the lives of their patients. They want access to childcare and elder care. They want to work in environments that are safe and non-toxic. They want to be treated with dignity and respect that they deserve. I am disappointed that I do not see any of this type of vision in the throne speech for any of our healthcare workers. I am not convinced that this government truly understands what the problem is, so they just throw money at it and hope it goes away. With all due respect, the entire country is trying to fix this issue with money. Our province has been trying to fix it with money for a decade. It's not working. It's time to get creative, and it's time to put some real work into our healthcare workers. There is hope. The throne speech announced 300 new spaces for childcare. It's good. The official opposition asked government to fund new childcare spaces for frontline essential workers close to island hospitals with extended hours for these workers. There are no details yet about these spaces, but perhaps we will get some good news for our healthcare workers soon. There is also the promise to establish a working group made up of representatives from Holland College, UPEI, Health PEI, nursing professionals to work toward expanding training programs. What I find confusing about this is that we were told over a year ago that the Deputy Minister of Health was already working tirelessly with these representatives to expand programs. If the Minister and Deputy have already been working with the colleges and UPEI, then he would be well aware that one of the main barriers to increasing training spaces is that there simply aren't enough experienced nurses to train them. In particular, we were told that work was being done toward implementing a 2+2 LPN to RN nursing program, of which there is no mention in this speech. In fact, there is no mention of upskilling supports for RCWs and LPNs at all. Providing paid opportunities for retraining of existing staff can have many benefits. Firstly, RCWs and LPNs already have frontline, first-hand experience working in healthcare settings. They understand what the job entails and are less likely to burn out than fresh graduates who may find once they are in the workplace that this job is simply not the right fit for them. And that happens, Mr. Speaker. There is simply no substitute for experience, and this is why retention is critical. Upskilling also creates additional capacity, since you can train a new RCW more quickly than a new RN starting from the very beginning of their training. I have heard from countless RCWs, and LPNs who are asking for these opportunities for new challenges. If we want to retain these staff, we need to show them that they are valued and invest in their futures as well as ours. Mr. Speaker, this timid vision got me thinking. What is my vision for healthcare on PEI? Is it any bolder? Luckily, I've been considering this question since I took on the role of health critic. My vision for healthcare involves better care for all islanders, from our pregnant mothers to our seniors and everyone in between. There are so many specific changes that I want to see on PEI. I want better maternal health care supports, better home care, better mental health and addiction services, increased access to family physicians, and so much more. However, I recognize that these improvements to healthcare are something that everyone wants, and everyone has wanted for generations. So I ask myself, why can't we ever achieve them? Why does it feel like we keep going in circles and never truly attaining the results we want, regardless of the amount of money we put into it? Healthcare workers and managers repeatedly see that by the time the ink dries on a new strategy, their leadership will likely change and the focus will begin to shift elsewhere. I hear about this all the time. Constant change of direction and lack of action are demoralizing to the front line of healthcare delivery. COVID has only amplified this problem. Funding to programs and providers does not appear to be consistently based on ongoing evaluation, quality, or cost effectiveness. This is a fundamental problem. Our healthcare system needs to reorganize people, infrastructure, and funding to align with patients' care paths through the system. We need an integrated healthcare approach. What does this mean? Well, for example, over 1 in 3 islanders are living with a chronic disease. However, many of these patients do not have a care plan that is actively managed by a primary care team, a physician, nurse practitioner, pharmacist, specialist, and dietitian working together, for example. Where care plans do exist, they are not often shared with care providers outside of the family's physician's clinic. In an integrated model, teams of providers in primary health care, acute care, and continuing care work on a single plan for each patient designed to meet the patient's care goals. Each patient's health information flows to all of the patient's care providers Decision support tools bring the latest medical knowledge to bear wherever the patient receives care. Care is delivered in the most appropriate location, in a community setting, rather than in a hospital whenever possible. Patients are engaged in their own care, receiving information, and taking part in decision-making. Constant measurement and benchmarking of care quality and patient outcomes keeps care levels high. Healthcare integration is not something I've just come up with myself. It is a direction in which the highest performing healthcare systems around the world, both urban and rural, are already moving. And this level of healthcare is what I envision for PEI. The official opposition has urged government to consider this type of approach with health hubs, or what the government is now calling health homes and health neighborhoods, aligned with recommendations from the College of Physicians. And I want to note that the college should receive credit here for advocating strongly for this change. I am really happy to hear that government is pursuing this type of health care. But as I said before, I am wary of this government's promises. I have not seen enough action to trust that what they say will ever come to light and will be fully supported to align with the evidence-based models promoted by the college. Unfortunately, we have yet to hear any real details about the new medical homes. Where will they be located? This is going to be an incredibly important and impactful detail. Communities are greatly affected by their ability to provide healthcare services close to home. We are fortunate to have many pharmacists in all of our communities, and I would love to see this government work with pharmacists to increase their ability to provide health services in local communities. Imagine if women could go to their pharmacy in their community to get birth control. Such a small change would have a great impact for island women, free up busy physicians, and bring services closer to home. Big ideas like medical homes are great, but we must remember that even small changes can have great impacts in our communities. Now, Mr. Speaker, I won't repeat the insightful words of my colleagues who have already highlighted the shocking lack of attention to critical issues like poverty and safe and affordable housing that directly impact the health and well-being of islanders. For far too long, we have been stuck in a siloed vision for healthcare that fails to recognize the fundamental importance of the social determinants of health. And this throne speech gives me no reassurance that this will change anytime soon. In fact, I quote from the speech, "Change will not happen overnight. The process is designed to be evolutionary rather than revolutionary." This deflating statement is nothing more than a built-in fail-safe, lowering expectations at the outset. Don't get too excited, folks. Not much is actually going to happen here. Status quo is just fine. This promise to disappoint really couldn't be less inspiring, particularly because of the incredible opportunity, Mr. Speaker, we have here in PEI to be innovative, to inspire, and to set the tone for what's possible, to be leaders in recognizing that the fundamental goal of government should be to ensure that everyone can live with basic health and dignity today, tomorrow, and for generations to come. Mr. Speaker, in closing, I would like to take this opportunity to thank all healthcare workers. You have been providing excellent care despite a system that is broken, despite often being overworked and understaffed. We are blessed here on PEI to have the amazing staff that we do on the front line. You have my promise that I will do everything I can to continue to bring your needs, concerns, and ideas to the forefront in this legislature. You deserve a workplace that is safe, to be listened to and empowered, and I can't thank you enough for all that you do for the health and well-being of Islanders every day. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Before we go to the next speaker, honorable members, 10-minute recess. You ready to go? Good. Okay, honorable members, next. Yes, we do. Honorable members, we'll now continue with the throne speech. The next speaking to it will be the honorable member from Mermaid Stratford and the opposition House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is a pleasure to rise to speak to the throne speech. I believe it's a great honor to be in this House and to be part of this type of proceeding and to get the opportunity to speak on behalf of your constituents and Islanders who've reached out with priorities, thoughts, concerns. And first of all, I'd like to recognize that I know a lot of work has gone into this throne speech. I know a lot of consultation and looking at what's the best road to travel for this province, which I think is important. I also look at how front-end loaded the throne speech is. We have some really interesting concepts and visions at the very beginning. I do see a very, I see something that's really missing, and that is, information from our finance, from a finance perspective. And I do know that there's a couple focused on agriculture, a couple paragraphs focused on agriculture, but they're jammed-packed paragraphs. So I'd just like to dig in a little bit. I'd like to start with tourism and culture. Firstly, I'd like to say I've grown up in a tourism family where we operated a golf course, we operated cottages, we operated a campground. And I recognize how devastating it is when you don't get those reservations. And that's what our tourism sector is facing right now. We don't have Islanders coming, we don't have visitors coming. And this is the time where your phone's ringing off the hook and your reservations are coming in and your deposits are coming in, and this is how you open for the year. So I would like to recognize the Minister of Economic Growth, Tourism, Culture for putting out a program that will help tourism operators to open their doors because they're not receiving those initial reservations that they would typically be getting at this time of year. But opening the doors is just the beginning, and there's a lot of work to be done. Our tourism industry is so crucial to this province. I will add, and I've said this a number of times, I do find it sometimes hard to talk about my dad, but my dad was very instrumental in creating a tourism industry here on PEI in the 70s. And we have built an island around tourism. So we can never forget how important it is. I'd also like to recognize how important agriculture is to our tourism industry. I think it's important to recognize the contributions of our agricultural industry to our island's tourism efforts. We could never pride ourselves on being a culinary destination if not for the great food we produce here on the island and that our island farmers work so hard to do. This great food prepared by island chefs and restaurants were renowned across the globe for it. They have also preserved the beautiful landscape that is so prominent in our tourism materials. The pastoral vistas are a common good that benefit to all islanders. Island historian Ed MacDonald has written about this strong connection between agriculture and tourism and how the increasing economic pressures on farmers is a threat to our tourism industry. The 2009 Thompson report talked about this as well, and the importance of island-wide land use planning for protecting these landscapes. It also recommended creating a community scenic viewscape program to help preserve and manage our viewscapes at the local level in both our incorporated municipalities and unincorporated areas. We need a process that brings together farmers, tourism operators, and rural residents. here we are more than a decade later since the Thompson report and 2 governments later, and we've still got no movement on this. It is important. I do recognize that it was identified as a priority in the throne speech, and it is so critically important that we have a timeline in which the Land Matters PEI project continues, and that when we do get the final results of that program, that they're implemented. We've reviewed this and we've studied this, and it's so incredibly important that we look at how land planning and land use impacts all islanders. Another area where we need better planning is in climate change, especially when we're talking about agriculture. There needs to be a well-laid-out plan that puts farmers right in the heart of reaching our carbon reduction targets. There has been some really great work completed by the Special Committee on Climate Change, and I expect we'll see some really clear recommendations on how agriculture is one of the most cost-effective and efficient ways to sequester carbon. Farmers, because of the commodity price structure, are price takers. This means that they don't set the price, the market sets the price, and it's often set by situations outside of our island farmers' control. The perfect example of this is the most recent farm receipts. If we look at the livestock receipts, cow, calf, and hog receipts are down 6% and 22% respectively. This is caused by market volatility outside of our island farmers' control. We saw Western provinces shut down their supply chains due to COVID. We didn't experience that here in PEI, but our farmers are still experiencing those impacts. The local impact is being felt by our livestock producers, and I don't see nearly enough action from our government to support these farmers. We have to find a way to support them in this way. This House voted unanimously in favor of the livestock strategy motion my colleague from O'Leary and Vaness put forward. I hear from farmers constantly, especially in livestock, but especially in cow-calf. Their concerns about getting paid less for the livestock they produce, which is less than what our island meat plant pays for off-province cattle. When we think about the transportation costs and the impact to our environment, we need to find a way to include pricing in a much-needed livestock strategy, and we need to figure out how to pay our farmers for producing the exceptional beef and other food products that they produce here in this province. The Standing Committee on Natural Resources and Environmental Sustainability invited the Department of Agriculture and Land to share their livestock strategy with the committee. We heard about all the programs that the department does offer, but it's status quo. We have heard what we heard was PEI essentially doesn't have a livestock strategy, a plan that sews all those programs together. And what we're missing is the new programs, the new supports that sets this out. This starts at the top, led by the minister and senior officials. A plan identified as a priority, a plan that sets out targets and measures benchmarks, a plan that reflects the voices of our farmers to support our island farmers. My colleague from Summerside Wilmot was correct when she said, talking points aren't going to cut it. You absolutely have to do better. And here's the thing, you can. Let's focus on the actions immediately that can be put forward and put in place to assist our island farmers right here, right where they are. My colleague spoke in her response about the capacity to draw down huge amounts of carbon through our soils. Pay farmers to do that. Pay farmers to do it. Our farmers need our Minister of Environment and our Minister of Agriculture to work together to make sure that our farmers are not just a major part of our climate change action, but that they are paid fairly for their part that they're going to play in ensuring that we achieve our target emissions. In some parts of the U.S., farmers are being paid to spread manure and compost on their land. It's an additional revenue stream for doing what they are already doing. What will a farmer do next? They will increase their operations because farmers love to farm. They will pay workers more because farmers pay more than minimum wage. They have to in this competitive environment. Mr. Speaker, we should also look at promoting agrovoltaics. This approach sees land co-developed to allow for agriculture and the generation of solar power. It's an initiative that communities around the world have adopted, particularly those who want to increase their energy self-reliance, who are faced with limitations with respect to the availability of land. Not only would this allow farmers to produce renewable energy to power their farms or sell to a utility, giving them a cost savings mechanism or even a new revenue stream, could also provide agricultural benefits. For example, growing crops under solar panels can help to retain moisture in our soil, reducing the need for irrigation. It can also protect crops from the harms of hail and frost. Farmers should be partners in our climate action, and we should be paying them for that. They say that one of the longest lead times is in farming. If we do not partner with farmers now, it will be one of the worst impacted over the next decade. I'd like to look at the promoting of economic competitiveness through workers. A few of my colleagues have stressed the importance of building an economy that supports workers, and I would like to echo these remarks. Our province is challenged with labor challenges everywhere, and the throne speech expresses government's desire to fill vacancies in the workforce. It is vital that government make PEI a province where skilled workers want to live. There are so many dimensions to making this happen. We need a province that offers good and competitive wages to workers. We need to ensure that workers have access to affordable and appropriate housing. We need good health care, including timely access to physicians and professionals. And we need to ensure access to high-quality childcare and education. We need to ensure reliable access to high-speed internet across the province. Mr. Speaker, I think our failure to create a competitive environment for workers has hampered our ability to attract trained professionals. Healthcare is a great example, and while I'm pleased to see reference to a few general initiatives to address recruitment, there's still much work to do. We hear from health professionals, as I'm sure everyone in this House has, that the conditions in the workplace are not terribly desirable. Facilities may be understaffed, placing greater responsibility and stress on workers. We hear that some workers feel unsafe, with reports of violence towards healthcare staff or a lack of security. Some professionals have left for this very reason. We hear that the hours can be unreasonable, with part-time staff basically becoming full-time staff. I heard this in a gathering, not a large gathering, in a very small gathering shortly before Christmas. And I'll just share, it was with a number of frontline healthcare workers. And one of the women that were in attendance had just returned from maternity leave. And within her first couple of weeks, she was already called on to do extra 12-hour shifts when she's got a small child at home. And that was because of there not being coverage. And we know that our frontline care workers don't want to see Islanders go without care. It's important to them, so they stay the extra long hours and take on the extra shifts in order to be able to make up for the time that somebody else may not be able to take their shift. But it will take a tangible commitment from government and collaboration and communication with our valued healthcare workers to address and resolve these working conditions. I'd like to talk a little bit on small business. I'd like to talk about how we support small business. One of our main approaches has been a gradual reduction in the small business tax rate over time. I talk a lot about the importance of performance measurement, and I think it's worth having a discussion about how successful this is. There's nothing wrong with looking at what we're doing to see if there's ways that we can improve it. There's nothing wrong with looking at data and statistics and evidence to see if what we're doing is truly a really good way to do it. And there's nothing wrong with changing. I think it's worth having the discussion about how successful this particular policy has been. Jeffrey S. Turner, a professor of business taxation at Osgood Law School, has described the small business tax deduction as having been developed in the 1970s, a time where small businesses struggled to access capital. He notes that in the present day, other, more plentiful sources of capital are now available to startups and other private Canadian businesses. There is no question that access to capital has improved here on PEI. We have special grants and loans available to small businesses through government agencies. And we have an excellent startup zone in Charlottetown that provides office space, mentorship, and learning opportunities to support blossoming businesses. Taxes, as we know, generate revenue that we use to pay for services. The gradual reduction of the small business tax rate is not cheap. Going from 4.5% of tax rate we had a few years ago down to the proposed 1% by this government in their platform would create nearly $10 million annual decrease in tax revenue. To put that into perspective, it's more than we spend on the Department of Economic Growth, Tourism and Culture. It's more than what we spend on the Employment Development Agency. And it's more than double what we spend on our Chief Public Health Office. We have no control over what small businesses choose to do with their reduced tax rate. And maybe that maybe that was the policy intent of government. But we know that trickle-down tax policies don't work. It often leads to larger corporate profits, which primarily benefits business owners and not workers. I'm skeptical that the decreases in the tax rate will have any significant impact in employment. At most, a 1% reduction in the tax rate would save businesses $5,000 a year. That's not enough to hire one person for a year. But they would have to be at the small business deduction cap of $500,000. I'm going to start again. At most, a 1% reduction in the tax rate would save a business $5,000, but they would have to be at the small business deduction cap of $500,000 in revenue to save that much. And I'll repeat, that doesn't even pay for one extra salary a year. It would be enough to hire a worker for 10 weeks at the current minimum wage. Are these the economic opportunities we strive to create when we talk about creating new employment? We also talk about lowering the tax rate in terms of improving our island competitiveness. This might also be overstated. Small businesses, in many cases, are businesses that are served by our local, that serve the local community or mom and pop shops. They're not necessarily supplying goods or services outside the province, nor are they necessarily competing with out-of-province businesses. And Mr. Speaker, I doubt the province is working to attract businesses with $500,000 or less in revenue to PEI. I imagine it is pursuing much bigger companies to bring to PEI. Lowering the tax rate might make businesses more profitable, but it does not necessarily improve the competitiveness relative to other jurisdictions. I'm not saying that we should not take steps to support small businesses. Quite the opposite. I think government needs to be clear about what outcomes it's seeking and whether lowering the small business tax rate is the best and most efficient way to achieve those outcomes. It is okay to look at what is currently being done to see if that is the most effective and beneficial way to do it. Are we looking to increase employment? If so, perhaps we could use small business tax revenue to fund employment and experiential learning opportunities or training initiatives. Are we looking to make businesses more competitive? Maybe funding mentorship programs, expanding export development and readiness initiatives, or helping to shift island businesses to the online market would be more effective and would give greater predictability to the outcomes arising from government policy. The speech from the throne makes reference to the future of carbon pricing on PEI, and this is another issue I'd like to touch on. I'm happy to see a commitment from government to return carbon pricing revenues back to islanders. Some people in the House might know that the Green Party platform commitment was to return the carbon pricing revenues back to islanders. Most islanders would come out better under this plan, unlike the current plan where just everyone is penalized. The Climate Leadership Act expects the carbon pricing regime to be revenue neutral, and it spells out a narrow list of permitted uses for the revenues. My caucus has expressed concerns before about whether the revenue currently being collected has been returned to islanders in accordance with the Act. I expect the Auditor General's upcoming report will have more information on that matter, and I look forward to reading that report from the Auditor General. Mr. Speaker, I know some people have been wanting to know how will we pay for the spending during COVID. And I don't want to dwell on this very long because I don't want to distract from or downplay the very urgent and important need to support islanders and businesses today. Instead of asking how we will pay for it, I would like to ask who will be paying for it. Prince Edward Island has one of the most generous tax regimes for high-income earners in this country. Our top tax bracket starts at $63,000. That's the lowest across the country. We have thousands of income earners above $150,000 as an example. Why do they have the same tax rate as people with half of their income? Is it unreasonable to say that our wealthiest islanders, those the least likely to have lost their jobs or employment during the pandemic, those whose material circumstances are so very different from our most vulnerable islanders, is it unreasonable to say that they should be picking up a larger share of the bill? Our lower tax revenues over the past 5 years, despite tax relief, a sign that our fiscal plan is working? I worry that our province does not actually have a plan or vision when it comes to the taxation policy of this province. Other than to cut them aimlessly, even when it might not be the best approach to deliver relief. Graham Steele, a former Minister of Finance in Nova Scotia, describes the equation succinctly: taxes are services. Mr. Speaker, taxes are how we pay for our mental health care. They are how we pay for our children's education. We should absolutely scrutinize any statement from government that suggests we cannot afford something, because where there's a will, there's a way. We have the means and tools to generate revenue, whether we want to use them or not. But rather than upholding a status quo that isn't really working for everyday islanders, we can be thoughtful about how we generate revenue. We can and should ask whether the wealthiest islanders should be paying more. We should question why we see statements in the public accounts suggesting that provincial revenues have increased because of a strong housing market. Is this why government has refused to take decisive action to address housing in our province? Because the government is profiting from this? We see islanders struggling to afford their homes or to buy their first home, while speculators and commercial Airbnb operators are getting wealthier. I can speak to two stories that I've heard in the last month. One from a frontline healthcare giver who is trying to find housing within the 15-minute radius of the hospital because this person works on call and they need to own housing that's within 15 minutes and they can't find it. Another islander, she's a single mother, She's looking for housing within her child's school district so that she doesn't disrupt her child's life. She's had no luck in finding any kind of housing within the school district that she's in order to accommodate for not disrupting her child's life more than it's already been disrupted. It's the same lesson we've learned from the online casino. For this government, it's not about people, it's about profit. Mr. Speaker, there's so much our province can be doing to generate revenue ethically and sustainably without placing a burden on the backs of working-class islanders. And likewise, there is so much more our province could be doing to support our island farmers. In closing, I just wish our throne speech had greater vision for doing both of those. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable members, is there anyone else that'd like to speak to the throne speech? I exhausted my leave. The Honourable Member from Summerside South Drive.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I won't be too terribly long here. A lot's been already said about this throne speech. But I had a lengthy response to the throne speech less than 2 years ago. All of what I said then still stands today. One item from my previous response that remains entirely dormant is electoral reform. I asked the Premier about his thoughts on it at the end of the last sitting, and I was encouraged to hear that he was still open to exploring this. More Islanders voted for changing the system by which we elect MLAs than voted for any one particular party that sits in this House. I think that bears attention, and I implore the Premier to take action on this. Islanders like how collaborative governments work. Let's see that it becomes the norm instead of the exception. I expected that in light of proroguing the legislature, a reset, that we would see the government take the opportunity to put forward a truly inspiring piece of forward-looking work. While some of what the speech contains is welcome, it's also lacking in so many ways. Some major issues are left floundering in the unknown, while some, like climate action, get plenty of attention, but no truly revolutionary actions are committed to. Government admits it right there in the speech that it's taking an evolutionary, not revolutionary approach. Well, in order to achieve some of the necessary goals of our society, we desperately need to be revolutionary. I've heard the Premier say that it will take an effort on par with the mission to the moon to achieve our goals, and that he believes that is possible. Well, the mission to the moon started with a speech that inspired the masses and convinced them all that it can be done, that we will do what some consider impossible. I hold out hope that the Premier will hold more to his previous mindset of the moonshot than relying on the slow crawl of evolution to get us to our lofty goals. We have multiple crises to deal with: housing, access to health care, climate, mental health and addictions, poverty, land, water, and COVID recovery, to name some. Go back to the moonshot mindset, Mr. Premier. I'm here to support good policy that sets us on that path. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Next speaking will be the Honourable Member from Charlottetown, West Royalty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I might take the podium.
Pardon? Podium?
Let me try. Mic on. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a great opportunity to speak to the speech from the throne. And I think I might do it a different way. I want to stay true to who I am, and I do a lot of speaking. And I think this document's very, very important. And I think I listened intently to the speech from the throne, and I was optimistic about what it was going to bring. I don't know if it fully encapsulates a good direction for PEI, and I'm kind of worried because what I want for people is for them to feel valued, and I'm not sure the speech from the throne goes that far. There's a big difference when people are talking about being interested in something and being committed to something, and
I don't know if this speech truly commits to PEI. And my previous career, I was a fitness instructor for over 20 years. And during that time, I had a lot of opportunities to work with thousands and thousands of people. And as a military fitness instructor, it became easy to just motivate people and to get them going. You just went into a gym and said, go and do whatever. But as you get moving along, can you get people interested in the path they're taking to wellness, to health, to being better? And that's what I'm trying to focus on. And saying that, there's a little, over the years, when you get people motivated in a gym, as an instructor or whatever you're doing, you can not give them clear direction, and I have done that often. I have said, just run, just jump up, we're gonna do a couple laps, go. But if you forget the instruction to tell them what direction they're gonna do, it's almost a little bit of chaos at the beginning. And they start running in different directions until they work it out themselves. And that's just a simple story to say that details are important. And when you look at that, when you look at a situation like that, when you're trying to motivate a group, we have to know where we're going as a province. And this speech and this direction is kind of people running in all kinds of different directions. And that's how I see it. And I'm here to try to make you understand why I feel that way. I mean, there's a lot of plans and strategies, and I know a speech from the throne has to be vague and has to be, just an outline. But this speech is lacking on some directional pieces, and it's very reactionary. And I'm going to try to explain that during my time at the podium. I also wanted to see more for my district, District 14, and the people that live there. And they're, like all Islanders, they're struggling, and it's a very amazing district, just like everybody else's districts around. But ours sees different socioeconomic groups, and everybody is trying to navigate COVID-19 together, and they're doing a great job of it. But I'm worried for their futures, because I think that affordability, poverty, housing are important issues that affect us all. And I really want to encourage the government to start thinking differently. And that's, when I'm speaking to groups, that's the first thing I say. In order for you to change your mind, start thinking differently. And I want to let the government know that this is the time to show leadership within your ranks and to think differently about issues, important issues that Islanders are going to be facing in the coming little while. And yes, this is a chance to reset our economy. This is a chance to reset our friendships. This is a chance to reset our values. If you have a solid plan, that will destroy excuses. And I want, if this speech from the throne is where we start as a province, commit to this, but understand more needs to be done. And we have to start now. I know our roles is we're opposition, government. I know that those roles, and we have to ask some of the tough questions. And I struggle with that as an elected official for 2 years. I struggle standing up and having to zing some of my friends on the other side. I mean, I know you guys struggle with that too, getting it. So, well, thank you very much. Minister of Action over there. But I think it's important for democracy, and I think it's important to have those debates. And I've learned from everybody in this legislature. And I think if we're learning together and doing our jobs, there'll be tough days, but we can come through and we can make Prince Edward Island better together. With the long-term vision in mind, I look at this as an opportunity to look at new tourism sectors, to look at how we reset now for the future. And I mean, ideas need to be brought to the table to look at PEI in the next 5 years after COVID and figure out where we're going, how we get people to our island, how we say, hey, this is a playground, but it can also be a place where people come in the summertime, maybe to spend 3 or 4 weeks and potentially, maybe they're coming here to lose 20 pounds. Maybe they're coming here on a wellness journey, where they have 2 weeks where they might sound a little bit funny, but it's an idea.
Go work on a farm.
Go work on a farm, But people are coming where this is the type of thing that we can look at in our sectors, and I mean, we might chuckle now at something like that, but it can be done. You look at what's happening with the great people at Island Trails, who are connecting the island with one of the most beautiful trails in all of Canada. All across our districts, we're being connected by one trail. And this is an opportunity for somebody to go on the Palmer Road up in Tignish, okay, and walk the trail from there all the way across our beautiful province. And if we can populate that with thousands of people coming here as a destination, these are the ideas. This is the time to reset. And this is just an example of something that my goal is to make people healthier. That's a goal of a lot of people I work with. That's a goal of a lot of people to change their lives in a positive fashion, and to make sure we're doing it together. Mr. Speaker, one of the toughest things is to motivate people to live healthy, and we all experience it. I had a conversation with a couple ministers this morning talking about their own wellness and how they change things. It affects us all. And I think that in here we can look at different opportunities to look at that collectively and to make ourselves better so we can make other people better. We deal with a lot of numbers, we deal with a lot of figures, we deal with a lot of problems, and we look at a healthcare system that's approaching $1 billion in our province. And I'll talk about that later, but how do we motivate each other? And it has to start with the people in this room to get active and healthy. And after that, we have to go in the communities and try to make things better. Wellness is a continuum, and I'm very passionate about it because it will make your life better. Not only will you live longer, you'll live better. And these are the type of things that we have to focus on. And if you want to get motivated, you have to start to change your mind, just like I've talked to this government about today. You have to collectively come up with a plan. And in the speech from the throne, I don't necessarily see a cohesive plan. We have a lot of things that we're dealing with. The long-term care crisis, and we talked about it, is a very, very serious, and it's very serious for a lot of reasons. Our population is aging at a rapid rate, and these are the people that built our island. And just the other day, I got a call from somebody that's in the neighborhood, and their mother is 95, lived a good life, and is looking at getting into long-term care, and he's scared for his mother because she's in one of the situations we always talk about, where she's fallen, her health is deteriorating, and I don't know where he wants to send her in different places, but those places aren't available. There's a huge wait list to get into the places that he would like to go into, and that's part of what we're dealing with. And long-term care, and some of this document here talks about long-term care and whether we're going to switch to home delivery or home care, which is what we need to do, but you cannot sacrifice one for the next. Okay, it's a continuum that's brought on by the beginning of people living well and healthy. And I want to remind this government of that. The speech from the throne would indicate that that's where we're moving. Okay, but long-term care, we need 400, at this continued rate, we need between 350 and 400 beds within the next 5 years. Okay, just think about that for a second. We are nowhere near ready for that. We're nowhere near ready for the beds. We can't find the staff to currently cope with our issues. And once we do get the staff, who knows how long they will be there for. And these are some serious, serious issues. And it is one of the, we hear about crises a lot, it's one of the most pressing crises. Think about your own mother. Think about your own father. Think about your neighbor down the street who's having to use the long-term care. We can only hope at this time, especially with COVID, that they're getting the care they need. Well, I know they're getting the care they need because we have a force of amazing civil servants there trying to work to make this better every day. I understand that. But to deal with this now is imperative. I just want to talk about the 3 long-term care facilities in my area. Prince Edward Home, Beach Grove Home, and I know a lot of family members and your families have been to Beach Grove and Garden Home. They do an exceptional job. Garden Home has done a great job of stepping up during COVID, keeping people safe. It's well run, it's well organized, but they struggle with HR needs. They do indeed, and it's private, and we've got to do a better job of helping them out. Beach Grove Home, and it's on the point. It's a beautiful spot, and I want to send a shout out to the kids in my neighborhood who could not go visit people, and I'm thankful for the mother who called me up and said, "Hey, we're going to make snowmen outside of Beach Grove Home," and that's what they did. A group of 4 or 5 kids went and made snowmen all over the place at Beach Grove Home. They can't go in to visit them. We can't forget that. We can't forget to focus on the people in there and the work they've done their entire lives. We need to invest more in helping them out. And the kids, the most special moment of that, Mr. Speaker, was when you're looking at glass, when you're looking through glass, and sometimes when they're inside, you can't see inside. And I was lucky to join them to make a snowman. I might have fired some snowballs at the kids. That's fine. They were all right. No, I didn't really. They were complaining about my snowman not being up to par. So anyway, just at the end, Mr. Speaker, one of the kids saw a shadow in there and looked like somebody was waving, and all the kids rushed over, and the sight was unbelievable. The sight was truly inspiring to look inside and see 7 long-term care people in that area, all spaced out, looking at these kids making snowmen. Like, this is one of the most touching things I've ever seen in my district. And it was done by a family, it was done by parents, and it wasn't done by us leading the way. They led the way. They did what they could. And now it's up to us to do what we can to support them in this chamber. PE Home. PE Home is a very special place, and you talk about wellness, you talk about the continuum of wellness and how you participate. And PE Home is a mixture of people. Okay, there's people in there that have had some serious issues, accidents, that are confined, need some assistance. And there's other people. There was a restorative care wing in there, and all kinds of different people. And there is dementia wings, and they're very special places. They're very special places at PE Home. They're unbelievable, and at Beach Grove too, Beach Grove Home as well. And I've had the honor, since I did run in my first election, I made a promise to them. That I was in, and I didn't know how to campaign. I didn't know what I was doing. I just know I wanted to serve people. So I went into PE Home and I did some exercise with them, to try to engage them. And they ignore me half the time, just like this chamber might be doing right now.
We're listening.
All right, listening.
Hanging on every word.
Are you? Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly. But So I was able to go in and participate with them, and I made a promise to them at that time, win or lose that election, I was gonna go in once a month and just do some exercise with them. And that's what I did for the next 4 years. I went in once a month and exercised with them, and that's how I got to know them. I didn't know how to support them, but I knew what I could do, and what I was able to do for them was go in and participate and help them. And that's what I did, Mr. Speaker, and I've made some incredible friendships. And again, you look at how COVID has disrupted us. I'm not able to go in anymore. And I hope to get back soon, but I just want to send a big shout out to PE Home and all the amazing work the staff that does there. It's unbelievable, the amount of effort. And saying that, on a more technical note, one of the leaders of the citizens group in there came to me a little while ago, and I've been doing some research on this and talking about it, and talking about the restorative care wing. And the restorative care is important because in this document talks about restorative care. And that's the single word why I'm considering what I'm going to do with this. Because restorative care is very, very important. It's incredibly important. And although it's mentioned in here, I don't know it's being put into principles. And I say that because the wing at PE Home, that was a restorative care unit, and I would go in to talk to people. In restorative care, what it means is you go in after you break a hip, after you have knee surgery, that you might not be recovering at the same level. So the QEH, the great people of the QEH, send them to Prince Edward Home where they can get some more assistance before they go home and continue on with their normal life. They just need a little bit more time. And when the crisis happened with Unit 9 and the dementia patients, and you know, the former Minister of Health, that must have been an incredibly difficult time. And I thought about this too, and it was incredibly difficult, and those decisions that were made there were very, very difficult. But something had to give. The system was taxed, and something was going to happen. So what happened with that is Prince Edward Home lost its restorative care unit. Do you know why they lost the restorative care unit? Because the dementia patients that were in Unit 9 had to go somewhere. And what happened is they took the restorative care unit, okay, it's no longer there. And that is a major issue for Prince Edward Island. And this stuff was brought up to me by a resident, and guess what they had to do with that restorative care unit? You have to make that a dementia unit now. And the dementia unit's closed off, and it doesn't become a general population. So the people at Prince Edward Home shrink a little bit when they're going around trying to mingle during COVID-19. That wing just becomes shut off. People that live that you can't see in there, you don't know what's happening. I know they're getting good care and everything's good, but the crisis that we were under, that COVID exposed our society to, ended up right at the doorstep of PE Home when they were under the most stress as residents in probably since Prince Edward Home has been in District 14.
No plan to correct it.
Well, there's no plan to correct it, but it also shines a light on an incredibly important crisis that is happening to us right now. And when you look at the future, I talked about some numbers yesterday about where our senior population is going, and to look at how much dementia we are facing in the next little while, we could be in a major crisis. Not one that COVID exposed, just a crisis of an aging population, no place for them to go, and what happens is that we need to do something now. And I couldn't wait to talk about this, just to draw a lens on this important issue, but it says long-term care, home care is definitely important. We talked about that yesterday. It's definitely going to become important in the future, but the planning has to start now. And Mr. Speaker, planning destroys excuses. I started talking about wellness and people running in different directions and hitting each other, and that's one of the reasons why I'm using that as a theme in this speech, was because unless we have a clear plan about how we fix our long-term care issues, our province cannot move forward. We have to take care of this now. And you look at different places in our nation that were affected by COVID throughout the long-term care lens, and you look at what Quebec has done, and I'd encourage the minister to look at what Quebec has done as a province, because they understand that long-term care is an issue. Okay, and they made a plan right away to get more workers, to change the facilities, to update what was happening in there, because the crisis forced them to change. Well, we didn't have as many hospitalizations. Luckily, COVID did not get into our long-term care facilities, but it exposed our weaknesses as a province. And as leaders of that province, we have to take action now. And one of the big things Quebec is doing is they changed the way they're recruiting people for those positions. And they're incentivizing not just with when people get done their courses, they've added courses, they've added people, they've targeted people specifically to work in those fields. And they're accelerating that, and they're giving people incentives to do that. And that's what we have to consider here in Prince Edward Island through our institutions like UPEI and Holland College, and developing specialty programs to deal with long-term care. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about how we have to look at that and the staffing issues there. And I mentioned it yesterday, is that the plan to provide home care is incredibly important. We see it with the Seniors Independence Program. We see it with various other programs here. But watch for the vacuum. And I think vacuums in politics are incredibly important to talk about, because what it could end up happening, Mr. Speaker, is that long-term care workers, and it's very stressful. It's very difficult to work in a long-term care facility. It's taxing, you're doing your best, and you're not getting the results in the patient. At that time, the stress of this is incredibly important. Whether you're a cook, a cleaner, whether you're an RCW, doesn't matter your field when you're coming in there. It's 24/7, it's all the time. And they are some of the most vital workers in all of our society. And we have to make sure that the vacuum and the stress of being in a long-term care worker does not make them come out and go into home care, because we won't have anybody in long-term care. And this is a major concern. You can see it right now. Our nurses are burning out. And we have to do a better job of making them feel valued. And along the way, I've spoken to nurses, and I've jumped around with them in motivational seminars and had some of the most incredible time when they're out to do professional development. But once you get down in a seminar of about an hour or two working with the nurse, once they learn to trust you as a speaker and you start to get in and let them know that I'm here for them, they have some serious issues. And if they get to talk about those things, okay, we better listen. And I do believe they're talking about those now. And they give so much to their job, and it's taxing, it's a difficult job, and it's the stress of an aging population, okay, and an overburdened system is what we're facing in the future, and we have to do a better job of protecting and helping them do their job. And a little story, Mr. Speaker. A nurse came to me after 30 years of service, and she was looking for a little bit of assistance because she was looking at maybe a career path change, and wanted some assistance from myself. And there wasn't much I could do. All I could do was really listen. And the reason why she went into a career path change is because the system was so taxed. she could not work her regular shifts anymore. And she'd been working a specific job, and then it was an 8-hour shift. She was incredible at what she did. Now she was being asked to work a 12-hour shift and work into the evenings. I mean, after 30 years of service. I mean, and this is a stress on our. This is just one story. There's a lot of stories, and she was so loyal to what she did, and the separation of her job after 30 years is what ended up happening, and it was very difficult for her. So, I'm not saying this to. I'm just saying this to draw awareness to it, to say that hey, we can do better. We can do better with our communication, with our HR staff, and we have to foresee the future. I really do believe there's some good incentives for nurses in here, and I think that it's a start, but in order to understand and to get the fruits of the issues in here, it's going to take some time. We have to go back at this time, this year, and do something to show the nurses and the staff out there that they're valued. And Mr. Minister of Health, I will be right by your side doing that. I will be right by, because it's all hands on deck to say that you are valued right now. Whatever you do in our healthcare system, you are valued. And I hope they're watching today, because that is an important thing that we have to translate to the people of Prince Edward Island who work in the healthcare system. And I'll be right there beside you. But it's got to happen now. These are good plans, but I don't want to have a gap in between. Okay, the people of Prince Edward Island deserve it. And we have to start at the long-term care, have to start in home care, and we have to start on the front lines. I was glad today, and I was glad the Minister of the Status of Women announced some grants today, and it was wonderful to chat with her afterwards. And I do believe those are very important. I think today is a celebration, and you know, those organizations are getting funding, and I couldn't be happier. And chatting outside is that, again, that's another issue that whether it's all hands on deck, and I'll be right there supporting. And I think it's important that as we celebrate International Women's Day on Monday, that men take this day and try to figure out what they can do better, in Prince Edward Island. I'm proud to be on an organization called Man Up, and it was just an organization that started to end violence against women, period. That's the mandate. You know, it started in 2017, I think, and it's just a group of men that have this theme to stand up and say, hey, you know what? It's not okay. It's not okay to be violent with anybody, first of all. But when it comes to women, when it comes to children, that's unacceptable, and society won't tolerate that. And people have to understand that men play an important role, and we have to do better. And the program, I think it was the Women's Network that was engaging men and boys, is going to be incredibly, incredibly important. Mr. Speaker, recently Jane Ledwell, Executive Director of the PEI Advisory Council on Status of Women, recently was quoted as saying, "Women have borne most of the job losses in the pandemic, and that has seriously effects for mental health and well-being. Women disproportionately share the work in the homes, especially caregiving work, is mentally and emotionally exhausting, especially if loved ones are struggling with anxiety in work, anguish, and despair. Add to the stress of winter, which can be difficult for mental health for many reasons. It's stressful balance of work and family relations when sick days and storm days could both be kept. You are aware of the paid work or keep you in the house. The unnerving prospects of long lockdowns and the home learning for students is always on the horizon. It is the right public health response to an outbreak, but the possibility leaves many women feeling a constant sense of anxiety and stress." And I'm glad she wrote that, and I read that a few times because it's true. The pandemic has disproportionately hurt women in our society. And I am not sure I have the answers to that. But I think that in the speech, I don't think the speech from the throne goes far enough to address that. And I don't know if it's a positive criticism. I want to say that we could do more for them. And I hope the Minister of Economics, we're listening and we're talking, and it needs to be there. It needs to be there to support them and to do more. And I'll tell you, like, just a story of somebody in my district that recently, a single mom, has fought hard to get back into a good living arrangement. She is a professional, makes a good income, and helps and services Islanders every single day, and the mental health of Islanders every single day. And she works tirelessly, and she's raising two incredibly amazing kids. But the trauma and the stress that she's been through, she doesn't even have time to deal with that, because the day-to-day lives that she's going through to raise her kids and to keep food on the table, it's overwhelming at times. So I really think that people like her need to be supported. And it doesn't matter what portion of the population that you're talking about. Women, BIPOC women, they don't come to me for as much support and help as I want them to. So I'm saying, come to me. Let's do this. Reach out for help, and let us know as what we can do. But I was hoping for more in the speech from the throne, because it goes on and it talks about that a little bit, but then it goes on to talk about, which is a positive, the daycare spots, and it's a positive. But there's a gap in there in the speech that doesn't address all the issues around that. So I'd like to, I just wanted to highlight. In the speech, I kind of talked about restorative care a little bit, but where that came out of was what we talked about. It's on page 6 of the speech, and I don't understand the line, and it's an important one, and I think I understand where the speech from the throne was going. From the perspective of patients, accessing the system for certain services is seen as complex and time-consuming. That was a patient perspective, and I understand that in there. But then it says, from the perspective of practitioners, too many resources appear to be spent on acute care and illness treatment rather than wellness and illness prevention. Well, yeah, and I mean, O'Leary and Vaness talked about it, and I mean, I didn't know until I heard from O'Leary and Vaness that it could have been code for cuts, and I mean,
he's really good at this.
Yeah.
Scare tactics.
Could be.
Speaking of sure. Criticizing civil service.
Yeah. So we have two different perspectives. From the perspective of the patient, to get in to see somebody as complex and time-consuming, to get, and then the perspective of the practitioner, acute care and illness treatment rather than wellness and illness prevention. And anybody that knows me, I'm totally game for anything wellness-oriented, but that's a long-term strategy. And I'll be the first one to admit that we don't nearly do enough for wellness, but regardless of what's happening in primary care at the moment, we have to invest more and have to keep on a wellness strategy no matter what. No matter what. And it's going to be expensive, but this reads that we're going to move from more resources from acute care and go into wellness. And as a wellness professional, I say that's a short-sighted statement in a speech from the throne. And I couldn't stop reading that. And that is an incredibly difficult area of the speech to read. Acute care and illness treatment. I mean, with an aging population, those numbers are going to go up. But what we can only hope for is that the wellness plan, okay, and the wellness plan and illness prevention affects that in the future. And it will, and the stats are there, the information is there. But, you know, one of the things should have been in here, a simple line to say that every islander needs 150 minutes of exercise a day. That's where our government's going. You know, it's not in there. It's not, you just talk about wellness and a center of well-being. I don't understand. Why didn't you just call it a center of wellness? We have health and wellness. Okay, why is it a well-being now? Where does well-being fit? Does it fit into mental health now under the minister? Why couldn't it go into wellness under Dr. Heather Morrison and start to talk about that? I mean, I don't understand these things. Acute care and illness treatment. So somebody comes along, and I'm going to try to connect these two together. I'm going to try to connect what we're talking about here. Take somebody in your family, and you get that phone call, and somebody in your family says, I've had a fall. Jane has had a fall, and I don't know, Jane might be maybe your mother, maybe she might have a fall, whether it be on the ice, okay, whether it be in her home, okay, she's had a fall. And now she doesn't know. Now she doesn't know. You instantly say, "Wow, a fall!" And everybody knows. And the Minister of Health and the junior Minister of Health, the now current Minister of Health, but he might. I know it's the real. He's only been in.
I would call him senior.
I mean, we had a clock on the former Minister of Health. I remember talking to the former. It was 7 months he was in for a while there, and he went up to 8 months. And so you're junior right now. We'll get to your month-long anniversary. Senior junior. We did have it, and it seems to be a trend. Maybe the gentleman from Morel-Donagh can get in to be a junior Minister of Health someday. But when we're talking about this, we're talking about take falls. Okay, one of the most serious things that can happen to somebody. Okay, a fall, a senior's fall, whatever it might be, incredibly important. When they go into the system, okay, then they go in and boom, they find out their hip is broken. Okay, that's surgery, and hopefully they are healthy enough to have the surgery, Mr. Speaker. Okay, that surgery and that fall, that one day, could knock years off their life. And that surgery alone costs taxpayers between $10,000 and $20,000. Okay, and not to mention the length of stay that stays in the hospital. And now they're into a system where it's costing how much a day? I don't know. I'm not crazy good at stats, but it's costing a lot of money to help that person out, and we're doing our due diligence doing that. But if we could back up and say, hey, you know what? Let's prevent that fall. Let's prevent that fall before it happens. Let's get in there and make sure every senior has their unit or their house inspected so that when the lights go off at 5 or 6 o'clock and they get up to turn the light switch on, that they don't fall. That there's nothing in the way, that they have some assistance and they're starting to feel confident. Then that senior goes on to live a healthier life, and just an ounce of intervention prevents a whole lot of pain on the other end. If we can reduce our falls in Prince Edward Island by 10%, okay, it's going to help the patient and it's going to help our system. And this takes planning, and this is why, Mr. Speaker, I don't understand that line. I don't understand that line, whether rather than wellness and illness prevention, they go hand in hand, but they're running down two different tracks. And we have to invest in both. And if you invest in the latter and if you invest in wellness, okay, it will change the system, but it won't happen overnight. It's going to take a lot of work, and it's going to take a lot of dedication. And I'm proud of the former minister for myself and I, and the premier. I went in and spoke to the premier about wellness on this stuff. I'm not sure what happened about that meeting. I think I gave him all my ideas, but I don't know if any of them came out of that meeting at the time. Yeah, but it's open that we're open to talking about that. We're open to talking about that. and doing something about it for the betterment of Prince Edward Island. And that's just one issue. And I'm talking to you about wellness being a continuum, and when you look at that, you have to start at an early age. You have to start at an early age. During Winter Wellness Day, which is an act, Mr. Speaker, in the province of Prince Edward Island, I'm pretty excited about it. Yeah, it's good, it's good. Montague Commuter talks about it being on the wrong day, but I had solutions to helping out with that little tiny hiccup, and I think that the solutions could have been done by the former Minister of Education. We talked about this, no problem. We just need to do a video for the high school students, and you know what? When you talk about it, there's no point in putting it on the right day. What is the right day for wellness? What is the right day for wellness? No, it's not. No. It's okay. It's okay. Yeah. The reason why it was picked that day, it's because it was the toughest week of the year. It's the toughest week of the year on the calendar. Okay, the third week in January, it was picked then, and those kids are writing exams during that week. Wouldn't it be nice to say, hey, you know what? You grade 12 students are going into post-secondary next. This is going to happen to you. You're going to be stressed out of your mind, and you're not going to know how to deal with your stress. And it's the time to get active when you are at your worst. When you're at your most stressed, you have to get up and go. And that's what that was a symbol for. Okay, and we could have done that. We could have done that with a simple video. We could have all done a video together, okay, and sent it to all the kids in Prince Edward Island. The technology is there. And you know what, Montague Kilmare, it's funny that we're having this sidebar discussion because, you know, when he was a young little toddler back in Vernon River, he was there. I went into his school and we talk about this. I was able to provide a motivational morning for them at Vernon River School, and he was the one up front. He was so excited. He was waving his hands. And we still talk to this day, but that might have been the best day of his life. So memories provide, as good wellness provides good memories. Yeah, was it 50? Yeah, I feel like right now, up here right now, I feel like I'm 50. No, but wellness is important, and Winter Wellness Day it happened this year, and I appreciate the people in education who made that happen, and who gave the authority to all the schools to say winter. Some kids had a double recess. Some kids they had snow. They had sleigh rides. It became something. Well, not that sleigh rides are really too much wellness. I guess it is. I guess it's great. They had fun. The kids had fun, but I was able to go around the province and do different events with the kids, and that was a day that I won't ever forget. The kids at West Royalty School that day, they flooded out the doors, and we all gathered outside. And the way they came out to get active and to listen to some music and to get healthy is incredible. They had 200 kids outdoors, and it was very inspiring to see the energy and life, that exercise and activity, and that they provided themselves. Following that, I was able to go down to St. Jean's. Sorry, not St. Jean's, West Kent, provided, and you know what? The teacher just called me and said, will you come down for Winter Wellness Day? And I said, no problem. And it's sometimes we talk about phone lines, we talk about different things. It's only just a call away. Following that, and one of the most inspiring things of that day was the organization at Birchwood School. Birchwood did an incredible job of 600-person school downtown, and Birchwood has struggled over the last few years with different issues inside Birchwood. Not anymore. That school is being run incredibly well, and kudos to the principal, kudos to the vice principal and everybody down there. And because of COVID, they said we're going to do the whole. We're going to have Winter Wellness Day in the whole school. The whole school. Like, to think about that. We're talking about how you get around issues, and what they did was they just set up Winter Wellness Day in the cafeteria, and there was a group of 30 kids in the cafeteria, and they set up the technology so that every kid in every single classroom was connected through their smart technology in the education field. And every single kid in the whole school was doing the same thing live. And you could feel and you could hear the energy reverberating through the entire school. 600 kids being active. And at the time, Mr. Speaker, I couldn't see anybody but the kids in front of me. And at the end, they all came on the screens, all the classrooms together, and it was just a sea of kids being excited about their own wellness, about their own exercise. And I was proud of that school because they continued it on with a seminar to kick off the month of February, which is Black History Month. And I was able to speak to them for 20 minutes on Black history in Prince Edward Island. And that's the type of thing where if you give kids, you give people in your province hope that they can do different things, they'll run with it. They'll run with the ideas. And I'm proud of Prince Edward Island for doing that. But it didn't just start there. Went to a daycare. We were talking about early age kids. We talk about the amount of stress that some of the workers are on in the childcare facilities. That's where it started. And we just went and we concluded Winter Wellness Day at 3:45 with the kids out there. So 25 kids out there participated. And at that age, when they're 2 and 3, you just have to put on Gangnam Style and they just get jumping around. It doesn't matter, right? But they're exercising and they're active and they're having fun. One of the most inspiring things during Winter Wellness Day actually was how the former Minister of Health, and I talked about it the day before, and we went together in Stratford, and we were trying to promote Winter Wellness Day, and I applaud him and in the future the Junior Minister of Health for the future, but we wanted to promote it, and I mean we there is a future, but you talk about you talk about a way that you can get together, and we talk about, it's funny because they're like, oh, the media sometimes says partisan, non-partisan, this and that overwords. The Minister of Transportation and I got together at the Stratford Town Hall, and we challenged. We got together. We put our Winter Wellness Day T-shirts on. And we went and we challenged them. We just walked into the gym, and there was a group of badminton players there. And we went and challenged a couple of kids who were playing badminton to a match. And you know what? We won.
We got spanked.
We didn't win.
Who was the better player between the two of you?
Well, he was pretty good. He was pretty good. But I mean, it was a warm moment for me being a member of the third party, and you know, you have to remember the portfolios that you do and how important it is. When the minister did walk into the place, the kids lit up, and we were bonded through wellness, through activity, through exercise. It didn't matter that we were on different sides of the house. It just matters that wellness was important. These kids were important. They embraced us, and they were really good players. But we had a good time. We had a moment to promote something, and that's why I'm here. That's why I'm here, and I want to thank the Minister of Transportation for that. That was important. But we have a lot of work to do, and this is just what I'm talking about with wellness in your communities. And I just want to talk a little bit about the active transportation, and that file is very, very important. And it's something that, and I appreciate the openness and the communication and the staff and everything that we've talked about, but I need to work together, okay, past the point of just one meeting on this, past the point of 2 meetings on this. If you want to make Prince Edward Island an active transportation hub, it cannot go through places that you want it to. It has to go through places that are needed, and it has to go through places that Prince Edward Islanders will use it. Okay, and I want to encourage you to continue to just have those discussions and make the tough decisions, because we can link up our province through active transportation. And it has to be just that, getting from one point to the next, and that's very important. My main focus is wellness and connectivity. And I recently had a public meeting which was a success, and I appreciated it. It was full to the limits of COVID. And we went to the other extreme to broadcast it live on Facebook. And I might have been putting myself out there as an MLA to do that, because there's all kinds of different voices. But this is a project that I want to get behind for the people in my district, because my district is disconnected by 2 industrial parks. 2 industrial parks. And it starts off, my district kind of touches the Premier's district. That's where this trail that I'm looking to help will start. Okay, and it will go and it will run all the way down to Beach Grove. And there's some major hurdles. There's some major hurdles, and we have to work together with everybody. And I'm just talking about this because it's an opportunity to talk about my district. And I was looking for a little bit more on active transportation, or a continuum, or a few lines on that in here, in the speech from the throne, but this is important. And you can imagine what it's like to get families out walking together. There is an unbelievable, one of the best, most important dog parks in all of our nation is right in the middle, and I'm so proud of it. And people come by the hundreds, and maybe even a few, at different times on a nice spring day, there could be 1,000 people there. You know, it's important. And I use that facility, and I see, you know, there's people gathering there all the time. The dogs are happy, the people are happy. But we have to do a better job of communicating, and myself included, with different aspects, with people that have different areas of interest, and just to let them know that any future trail will be consulted on with various people, and it's not going to be going through there. But one of the things, and the whole reason why there's people that live in the Upton area that can't get to the dog park without driving. They can't get there. It's only 500 meters away. They cannot get there, okay? So there's major issues in the place that I represent. There's major traffic issues. There's a lot of traffic, and there's some very basic things that we have to look at. And active transportation is one. And I just want to make sure you understand that I've had 40 or 50 meetings on this, okay? And I really want to say the government at the time, this is your job to connect Prince Edward Island right now. I'm here to help, but stand up and do the job that you can for all islanders everywhere in Prince Edward Island. And I'll be right there beside you to support and help you with that. And I'd like to thank the Minister of Transportation for coming to that public meeting that night. And that was very important. So you are listening, and I appreciate that. So, as we get, I'm not going to conclude anything. As we get moving on, it's important that when I started this, I talked about disjointedness of the speech, going from one area to the next or moving along, and I'm really worried about how all these different avenues fit in. And one of the areas that is pressing is mental health and addictions. And I know that there has been, and there's some things in here that are good, but I don't think that it provides clarity to what we're facing as a province. And we link those together, mental health and addictions, What does the future bring? How has COVID affected mental health and addictions? And I'm not sure we're doing enough. And I mean, you can talk about a center of mental well-being, and I don't understand. It's not a center. It's a one entry location. I asked somebody who was in this field for 20 years, what does this mean to you? And they didn't understand it. They don't understand it. So you have a lot of explaining to do if this is the avenue that you're going to take as a government. Because just putting it in a speech from the throne, it's not good enough. You better have a plan for that, because you betcha I'm going to be asking questions, and we're all going to be asking questions about that, because we want to get it right. And we have to do more. And I'm not saying this is all a government issue. I try to help people with that every day with mental health issues. I try to be there, to listen to them, to look them in the eyes, and to be there for them. Whether it's on the phone, well, I can't look them in the eyes on the phone, but I am there listening. And that's part of the issue. That's part of what we have to do as a community, is listen, pick up the phone, talk to people who are struggling more. I mean, it's just one small thing. But the government needs to be there when they are in crisis. And there's people struggling out there, and they're from all walks of life, but the ones who hurt the most are the ones that are dealing with poverty and are in poverty. And on top of that, the ones that are here from other countries, okay, in the BIPOC community, struggle 10 times worse. Kid in my community came to me. He said, I'm feeling this crushing pain in my chest. I got him everything he needed. There was community groups. He got every single box available, from Betty Beggs to Rotary Club, to everything he could, the church groups. He's doing it. He's struggling. He's still eating that stuff, still eating the food. I have this crushing pain in my chest because I can't pay my bills. He's a master's student in environmental studies at UPEI. Just got laid off from his call center. He's from India. He got here during the pandemic, Mr. Speaker. He hasn't been able to meet anybody. It's not the government's fault. It's just what we're facing. We have to do better. We have to do better in our own communities. I have to do better as an MLA. I have to do better for that young man. I have to do better and stop the car and talk to that person when I see them walking down the street. I don't see how a Center for Mental Well-Being is going to support him. He needs help. When we talk about mental health, when we talk about addictions are hurting our population. We have to talk about them together, yes, but separate as one. You have to treat the addiction, and then there's going to be mental health issues all over the place. Okay? I speak to luckily the good people at Reach and the luckily the good people at Reach have me come in to set the tone, and Reach is a great program in the Stratford area, and if the Premier's wondering, I get to speak to them for an hour to start the program. And that's why you get so many calls. That's why you get so many letters from them, okay? Because during that first time, okay, one of the things that I say to them at the end is I try to empower them to say, hey, you know what? If you want to be the person who creates change, if you want to be that person, go and send a letter to the Premier. Work as a group and send a letter to the Minister of Health and see if they'll come in. And I think they've been coming in to chat with Reach, so it's good, because it's the interesting stories. It's the stuff when we talk about mental health in here that you have to look through from their lens. They are doing it right. Mental health has affected each one of them. A group of 9, I'm just going to back up for a second. REACH is a program that is in the Stratford area that has been funded and supported, and it takes people in that are struggling, that might be ready to go and to get assistance, to get into the workforce, to learn the life skills, to be supported for 16 weeks, and to create a change in their life. And these kids are ready, and these kids are our future. They know they needed help. They got help, and they're trying to get out. But along the way, it's up to us to empower them. And there's more answers there if every MLA would go over there and talk to the graduates and to talk to them along the way, because they have the secret how we can help them through a mental health and addiction lens. You can see it in their eyes. And there's some drills that I do as a speaker that gets them to come out, and some of them can't participate. Some of them don't say anything, but you can see it in their eyes. They are fighting. They are in a tough situation and getting out of that situation. But we have to do more. We have to do more. We have to get more people into a program like REACH. That is part of the solution, okay, to making a better society. They are our leaders. If we let them go by the wayside, we are in big trouble. And I'm proud of that program. I'm proud of the way the province handles that program. And I'd like to just encourage to continue funding. And these are part of the solutions, okay, that we have to look at, that I want to see in the speech from the throne. I want to see more programs like that because they're proven to work. Recently, I went down and spent some time at Smith Lodge. Went down and just hung out. Just sat out front and chatted with people, you know. But you know what I did before that? Before that, I went to Deacon House, and I just toured Deacon House. I went around. And Smith Lodge, as you might know, is doing, I mean, the staff are doing all they can. Okay, it's an important place. Deacon House is an important place. But when I see the words in here, it doesn't match what's happening out there. And we need a better plan. We need a better plan to assist and to help. Deacon House is in such poor shape. I don't understand. And I'm willing to help. I'll come over and do whatever. I don't care if we have to do it ourselves. We have to fix that place. We have to help them. We have to make it suitable. Smith Lodge, Bedford McDonald House. You know, I talked to them about their journey. I got information right from the people who are struggling. They're open to, they're excited to see it. They're excited to see us. Go down, see them. Go down, hang out. Amazing staff. They're trying their best, but there's gaps. And I don't know. The time I was there, I don't know how we're measuring what's happening down there. I don't know. We can't just give a pot of money to an organization and say, go and do this. We have to do better. We have to do better. across the bridge, the Southport Hotel is, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's going to be closing. It's going to be closing. It's bought. The land's bought. This is going to be a beautiful new area, and that's great. But what I'm worried about is the people who are at the Southport Lodge now. You know, you know about this in that area. I'm worried about them because if you do the circuit, if you link up Prince Edward Island, what happens when they get evicted from that area? Where do they go? What happens? Can Smith Lodge be there? Can Bedford McDonald House be there? Is Blooming House an option? We need to really look at these issues. And I'm digging a little bit deeper into them, but deal with their addictions, support their mental health, develop programs. Our government needs to support that direction and where we're going. Absolutely, 100%. And when I see a call line and I talk to people about they're not sure that's the best area, that they're not sure that's the best thing to do, I mean, go for it. If you're going for it, Premier, go for it. Make sure it's the best call line ever. But there is an HR crisis within that, just under the surface of that. And unless we deal with that crisis, I don't know if it's another entry point and not know where to put people. But coming out of this and the issues that we face for our most vulnerable islanders, we have to do better. And you have my commitment. I will support you along the way to doing this. But your government, and these are some outlined things, whether it's long-term care, whether it's mental health, that we need to do better. And that brings me to the issue that we're facing on our roads. You know, being the chair of the Standing Committee on Health and Social Development has taught me more, and I'm so honored to sit with a beautiful group of MLAs that care deeply about the province. They've done an incredible job, the members of that committee. But it was an eye-opening experience to hear from all of Prince Edward Island some of the most important issues. And when we had our RCMP constable in talking about drunk driving and what's happening on our roads, it was incredibly eye-opening. And I don't see much in here on that. And it has me incredibly worried. Drunk driving numbers are up on Prince Edward Island by an astounding number. We are in a crisis because what's happened is the island's population, because the tourists aren't here, has fallen, or as a whole, in the summertime, but our drunk driving numbers are going up. And the look on Constable's face when she was talking about this, Dr. Eberly, do you believe? Or Constable Eberly? Yeah, was incredibly disturbing. This is a crisis situation on our roads. And COVID has displaced our regular patterns. So people can't go, they can't go to places that they could normally catch a cab at. They're in different areas in our province, moving from place to place. And I'm not sure if that's what's happening, but it is incredibly disturbing. There's an area in my community on North River Road, in the corner of North River Road and Beach Grove Road. And you see on a Sunday morning when somebody has hit that pole. Okay? You know exactly what's happened, and it's so disturbing. We are not investing enough in harm reduction, period, but when you look at drunk driving, There's some major gaps there. We need to invest more. The PEI Liquor Control Commission was in and we talked to them about this particular subject. And we have lost control of this problem. And it is an unbelievably big problem because I don't know when the sun goes down on a Saturday night and you're minding your business, if you're driving around, and what's coming the other way. On the Malpeque Road, just heading out of town, a car went off the road, not 3 weeks ago, hit a pole. The driver was drinking. He was going to Summerside. He didn't make it out of Charlottetown. What are we doing as a government? What's more important? When a newspaper reporter writes, this is the most cases I've ever seen in our court, 14 drunk driving cases in one day, just last week. I saw that, and I don't think that we're doing enough. When the group MAD is coming along and saying, all we want is decals on school buses. I mean, I know the minister's had good discussions with them. Put the decals on the school buses. And I know they're coming, but more needs to be done. And I think it's up to each MLA to reach out to MAD and join them in their checkpoints and let Prince Edward Island know that if we can't invest more money into this, we can do something ourselves. Get out there in your communities. Okay, police the roads.
Citizens on patrol.
Exactly. And you don't have to look any further than my friend Hal Perry. Tignish Palmer Road, excuse me.
Honourable member, 2 days in a row.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Speaker. Just getting a little bit tired. Tignish Palmer Road doesn't just do it once. He does it for over 10 years on New Year's to drive people around. Like, think about that. Think about that. You know, and this time when he parked, he was driving from his area and dropping people off at Mill River. And when he was parked there, he called me and he said it was a busy night. And you know, he's out doing it. He's living it. He's completing. Okay, he's helping people out. Does he save lives with that? Yeah. But that's what I want to do, and that's who I look up to as an MLA is someone that's doing that since the days when I was just a little boy. It's good to see that. So, I want to encourage, and I mean it's just that's an issue that I would like to see and put more emphasis in. So I just want to kind of talk about that. Harm reduction was mentioned in here. Harm reduction. We need to destigmatize and be non-judgmental when we're talking about harm reduction. And I'm not sure we get it from this document, what harm reduction really is. Harm reduction is a strength-based and client-centered, a whole-person approach with supports. With supports. If we're going to move towards a harm reduction strategy in Prince Edward Island, it's going to take a lot of work. And you can't just throw money at harm reduction. You have to be there for the clients. Safe injection sites, we were talking about that today, and it was great to see today the Minister of Health agree and support harm reduction or safe injection sites. That's one part of. He does have the power to do it. We just didn't get any information on it, and I think it's important. But for example, there's a new federal program that now looks at opioid vending machines, and it's launched in 2 different provinces, BC, and it's launched right here in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. Okay? That's a $3.5 million investment from the federal government, and it provides medical-grade opioids, safe drugs without fears, and there's no shame and stigma. You have to have a handprint, put your handprint on it, and it can get you safe drugs. And it's being done in our country. So we talk about harm reduction in here, just a little note. Other provinces are sailing past us in harm reduction. They're sailing past us. Whether it's drinking and driving, whether it's, opioid use. We are getting a little bit of whiplash. We have to go and lean on the expertise of our groups like the Peers Alliance. When the Peers Alliance spoke to the Standing Committee, I asked them, what would you give Prince Edward Island? What would you rate Prince Edward Island on a scale of 1 to 10? What would you rate Prince Edward Island in terms of harm reduction? What would you give our province? They gave Prince Edward Island a score of 3. A score of 3. And we need to educate ourselves more and do better. That's not good enough. People are hurting. This is affecting our communities. And I just want to say much more has to be done, because harm reduction affects us all and our families. Going back to the speech and talking about the recruitment of professionals, and I think O'Leary and Vanessa kind of mentioned it. Have we abandoned different elements of a strategy that you were on before? And I'm worried about that, because when you talk about nurses, I mean, there's a lot in there for nurses. There's some different directional paths for doctors, but I'm telling you right now, if you do not do a better job of recruiting the allied professionals that go along with that, we cannot move our system forward. The OTs, the RCWs, social workers, the physio assistants, speech language pathologists, psychologists, and physios. You need a physio discharge to get out of the hospital, okay? For the most part. They're the people that let you out. Are you safe to go home? That is an area last year where we struggled. We struggled with filling that position at the QEH, and they are vital to giving people the confidence and the understanding and the information to get better. And that's part of the wellness strategy. And the allied professionals are in desperate need around the country. Desperate. And I've learned a lot through the lens of my daughter, who just started a career in physiotherapy. She had 4 or 5 jobs offers right off the bat.
Honourable members, the hour has been called. Yeah, I know. Roll late. Honourable members, before I call on the member to close, I see a lot of dishes and stuff on the desks. If we can clean it off, because the staff has to come in to sanitize for the committee meeting. So if you have any dishes or something, can you drop it off in the kitchen or anything on top of the desk that belongs at all, because we have to sanitize for the committee meeting. I'll call on the honourable member from Morell-Donagh and the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, seconded by the member from Montague-Cumer, that this House do adjourn until Tuesday, March 9th, let's say 1 o'clock p.m.
Shall it carry? Have a good weekend, everyone.